Morning, Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee. We're back for Ordinance 24-0521, Ordinance of Estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025. Eric Costello, Councilman from the 11th District, Chair of the committee. Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District. Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District, member of the committee. Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District. To my immediate right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. We're joined by representatives from the Mayor's office and the Council President's office. We are here for Department of Public Works, DPW. Director, if you could please take it away before you get started on your presentation. Hey. Please introduce all the members of your senior team that will be testifying today, first and last name and position title, please, and then jump right into your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Costello, honorable City Council members, city staff, and members of the public. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present before you today our recommended budget for the upcoming fiscal year. I'd like to start by thanking Mayor Scott and his leadership team and the Department of Finance for their continuous support. Honorable members, my name is Khalil Zaid, Acting Director for the Department of Public Works. With me today are the following members of my leadership team. Deputy Director Richard Luna, to my right. Chief of Staff Latoya Curtis. Bureau Head of Solid Waste Craig Jetta. Acting Bureau Head of Water and Wastewater Paul Sion. Chief Administrative Officer Deepti Moda. Chief Financial Officer Aaron Moore. Chief of Equity and Environmental Justice Marco Merrick, but he's not with us today. Deputy General Counsel Katie Brinson Hinton. And Chief of Legislative Affairs Marsha Collins. Honorable Council, I spoke before you last Tuesday in my confirmation hearing and discussed some of the opportunities and vision for the department. I will very briefly highlight some of those points again. With your continuous support for our employees, we will improve their working conditions and help their professional development. We will set the metrics required for accountability to our management staff so we can stabilize our enterprise funding source and create a reliable and affordable water for all citizens. We will help foster and grow an environmentally sustainable culture within Public Works to ensure compliance with federal and state laws. We will do that by maintaining to provide weekly recycling, improving our street sweeping operations, and developing better relationship with our environmental group partners. As we examine the budget before you today, the investment the administration and you made in staff, facilities, and fleet is unprecedented. With the ongoing salary study to examine wages by DHR, a new investment in facilities and modern fleet, our workers will be ahead of their peers in many places around the country. Now, I'll turn it over to Deputy Director Richard Luna, who will present our fiscal year 2025 budget.
Thank you, Acting Director. Good afternoon, Chair Costello, members of the council. My name is Richard Luna. I'm the Deputy Director for DPW, and I'll be presenting the fiscal year 25 budget for you. Before I jump into the presentation, I do want to take a moment to just highlight a few of our accomplishments here at DPW in the city over the past year. Starting first in our customer service and support division, that group continues to set higher standards for delivering excellent customer service to our over 400,000 customers in both Baltimore City and Baltimore County. You know, one of the biggest successes of the past year was distributing $15.8 million to over 75,000 customers to pay off their outstanding debt that they incurred during the pandemic. And this year we surpassed $7 million in Water for All assistance provided to over 7,000 customers since the program first launched back in 2022. Through Promise Pay, our custom payment plan service, we have enrolled over 4,800 customers and have collected $3.2 million to date. Promise Pay is now available to all customers, residential and commercial, which will further help us with our collections efforts. And speaking of collections, we have successfully collected over $26 million in outstanding billing debt from some of our largest commercial customers. I'll say that number again, $26 million that we've collected in a new process that we just started back in December. So in just a short month time, we've made some huge progress on going after our largest commercial accounts that hadn't been paying their bills. So I want to thank the multiple team members that worked in improving our collections efforts and for everyone's continued work to ensure water affordability for our customers. Another great accomplishment of that group is we've actually worked with OPI and DHCD in recent months to address shutoffs at vacant properties. So in the first step of that process, we actually targeted vacant properties that were set for demolition, and we got those properties turned off. And then more recently, we partnered with OPI to look at data to see which vacant properties are consuming the most water. So from that list, we actually strategized and came up with a metric to go after those properties first. And I'm happy to report that 25 of the 100 vacant properties with the highest water consumption have been shut off to date. And we're continuously working on that process with OPI and DHCD to make improvements overall. Moving next to the Bureau of Water and Wastewater. As the director mentioned, we implemented a new salary scale earlier this year that covers 1,500 employees and brings their wages to market so we can retain and recruit some of the top talent within this region. In December, both the Ashford and the Druid Lake tank projects came online, ensuring that all the water within our distribution system is protected. This was hard work, years and years of hard work by our team, and a nearly $275 million investment to our water infrastructure. And finally, in calendar year 23, both the Back River and Patapsco wastewater treatment plants recorded their best performance to date. Both plants have consistently performed well below their permanent levels, and it's a huge testament to the staff within the Bureau of Water and Wastewater for all of their hard work and dedication for ensuring our compliance overall. In solid waste, in November, DPW presented to you and the City Council adopted our new 10-year solid waste management plan. The plan consolidates goals for managing the city's solid waste stream, assesses the existing solid waste collection system, current and future disposal capacity needs, and how zero waste strategies like reuse, recycling, and composting are to be implemented. And last but certainly not least, in March, we resumed weekly recycling collections for Baltimore City. This required aggressively recruiting and hiring new staff, right-sizing our routes, and securing a new fleet to modernize our operations. Since launch, our crews have seen route completion times reduce, even though we're actually performing more routes right now, daily routes, than ever before. And with more trucks on our way, our crews will have the vehicles they need to continue providing this critical service to Baltimore City residents in a much more sustainable fashion. I want to thank the solid waste and full DPW team for their hard work in making the weekly recycling launch successful. I also want to thank Mayor Scott, the administration, and most importantly, our colleagues over at DGS for their continued support in helping us achieve this top priority and goal for DPW earlier in the year. Here at DPW, we strive to be a best-in-class agency, and it starts with our mission and vision to be a strong proponent and protector of our environment. Our work at DPW impacts nearly all aspects of our daily lives and is extremely important to the health and vitality of the region. As you see here on the screen in front of you, our agency goals, we hope to keep neighborhoods and roadways clean, implement high water quality standards, and are moving toward more sustainable and environmentally friendly best practices. This is an overview of the Department of Public Works. It's one of the largest agencies in Baltimore City and also serves as a regional water utility. The DPW has several service areas that are critical in sustaining the region's health, environment, and communities. Overall, DPW's fiscal year 25 budget includes $726 million in operating expenditures, $399 million in capital expenditures, and 2,800 budgeted positions. The next few slides, I'll walk through each of these service areas for you in more detail. Starting first with our Service 660, this is the Administration for Solid Waste. Our Bureau of Solid Waste is mainly supported by the city's general fund, and the service here is 100% supported by the general fund. This is our administrative arm for the Bureau with $3.9 million budget for fiscal year 25. It includes our Bureau Head, Deputy Bureau Head, and administrative support staff. As part of the recommended budget, it includes 3 new positions, which are cost neutral to the agency. I'll note that the 3 administration services, like the one on the screen in front of you, historically do not have performance measures. However, each of these offices or divisions are tasked with ensuring overall agency performance and meeting the goals set by the administration and our agency director. Moving next to public right-of-way cleaning. This includes street and alley operations, mechanical street sweeping operations, cleaning of business districts, marine operations, and graffiti removal. This service area has a $28.2 million budget and includes the elimination of 2 positions that were no longer needed. This service is majority supported by general fund, but also includes some stormwater utility and special funding like the Horseshoe Casino Local Impact Fund. I want to take a quick moment to just highlight the work of our solid waste teams that they're currently performing. As part of the mayor's newest services blitz, our graffiti abatement crew is on track to remove 2,500 graffiti markings within a 90-day period, and we are on track to mow 6,500 properties or lots during that same time frame. It's just excellent work, continued work by our solid waste teams. Every time there's a call for them to step up and answer, they do that, and we've always been champions of the Mayor's Services Blitz challenges. In terms of performance measures, you'll notice a change in the number of service requests completed, but I wanted to note that the intent here is to see decreases year to year, meaning we hope to see fewer calls for service to address dirty alleys, streets, or graffiti removal. Our next service area is vacant and abandoned property cleaning and boarding. It has a $14.3 million budget, with the majority of that on the general fund. There is a small portion of this budget, just over $1 million, tied to CDBG funds. 2 positions in the service area will be eliminated as part of addressing long-term vacancies, and a 3rd position is eliminated to offset the creation of a new Operations Specialist 1 position in the administrative branch of solid waste, which was on a previous slide. In terms of performance measures, we also hope to see decreases in the number of rat abatements, which is why you see a decline in our fiscal year 25 target numbers. Service 663, waste removal and recycling. This is the team responsible for mixed refuse and recycling collections at over 200,000 locations within the city. There is a major change in the fiscal year 25 budget, which is annualizing the 20 crews that were added last cycle to restore weekly recycling. So as you recall in last year's budget hearing, we spoke about adding 20 new crews. Half of them were going to be general funded, half ARPA funded, that were needed to implement weekly recycling. All of those crews have been hired and have been in place since March of this year, and the 20 crews are now part of the baseline budget and fully supported by the city's general fund. The total budget for this service area is $48.2 million. In addition to the 20 crews, we eliminated 2 positions that were long-term vacancies. You'll notice that in the performance measures, there's a slight decrease in our target tonnage collected for recycling. This is because the number you see for fiscal year 25 is more accurate based on our current collections. However, over time, we would anticipate that number rising each year as residents take full advantage of our recycling program, diverting trash from entering our landfill, and as we continuously push out new communications and best practices for the public in terms of recycling. The final service for the Bureau of Solid Waste is the waste reuse and disposal, Service 664. At $34.6 million, this is the area of the budget tasked with maintaining the city's landfill and Northwest Transfer Station. The budget reflects an increase in tipping fees by $3.7 million and includes $7.7 million for landfill closure and development costs. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, as we see more recycling completed here in the city, the percent of waste collected that goes to recycling would also increase over time. So that's the intent there on the performance measure. We'll move now to the Bureau of Water and Wastewater, starting first with the Service 670. Our Bureau of Water and Wastewater is responsible for delivering water to nearly 2 million people in the region, processing wastewater at our treatment plants, and maintaining our storm drain infrastructure. In order to provide these services, we charge our customers through their regular water bills. So the fiscal year 25 budget reflects the new rates effective July 1st that were previously approved by the Board of Estimates. And on the screen is the administration section over the Bureau with the fiscal year 25 budget of $62.8 million. I want to take a moment and highlight the customer escalation manager position that you see on the screen. So our customer escalations units, both in the Bureau Head's office and in CSSD, have actually been tremendously helpful providing excellent customer service. And this position will ensure we are managing the team appropriately and responding to your requests in a timely manner. Next, our water management group. This is the team directly responsible for operating the water distribution system. The recommended budget for this service is $93.3 million, and there is an 11% increase due to the new salary study that we implemented in the current fiscal year. For performance, the expected outcome is to see decreases year to year in the number of water main breaks occurring within our distribution system. Service 672. This is the team responsible for timely and accurate meter readings and water billing for our over 400,000 accounts in both the city and the county. The budget for this area is $30.5 million and includes a 10% increase with the implementation of the salary survey. Our CSSD and meter shop staff continue to set high customer service standards for the agency, and they put together some of the best internal training programs within the city. One of the performance measures you see on the screen, call answer rate, is a newer performance measure we started tracking in fiscal year 23. We felt this was important for us to track because during those pandemic years, our call answer rate and average time to answer the phones was just not meeting our standards. So as we developed our new processes and new standards and trained our staff to provide excellent customer service, we've actually seen a dramatic turnaround in those metrics and hope to see those numbers increase each year. I'll also note that when customers do call our call center, our agents are picking up the phone within 20 seconds, and in most times we answer in under 10. It's just an incredible job by our management team and CSSD for their continued focus on improving our overall customer service within the agency. Our next group manages the 2 wastewater treatment plants at Back River and Patapsco, as well as the dozen or so wastewater pumping stations throughout our system. The service area has a fiscal year 25 budget of $174 million, with a 10% increase related to the salary survey implementation. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, with our strong focus on compliance, both plants are seeing their best performance in DPW's history. And as we make additional capital investments to our facilities, we hope to continue on this path of significantly performing well below our allowed permit levels. Service 674 is our surface water management group, which provides protection, enhancement, and restoration of the city's watersheds. The recommended budget for this area is $25.1 million, which saw an increase due to the salary survey implementation and an increase in contractual spending for emergency-related events and MS4 compliance. For performance, we intend the number of plans reviewed and responded to within 14 days to increase year to year. And we're also happy to report that we recently hired a new plans review and inspection section chief, which will help us ensure that we are responding in a timely manner to plans submitted to our office. The final service of the Bureau of Water and Wastewater is our engineering and construction management program. This area provides design, construction, and management of our assets and our capital improvement projects. The $198.1 million budget is an increase from the previous year due to the salary survey and increased costs for health care benefits. I just want to note there and give kudos to our OEC team for exceeding that 15-mile replacement target back in fiscal year 23. And want to highlight that we are on target to meet our 15-mile replacement goal for the current fiscal year. My apologies, it's not advancing to the next slide. There we go. Oh. Okay. Finally, we have Service 676, which includes the Office of the Director and our HR staff, fiscal, procurement, contract administration, and legislative affairs group. In fiscal year 25, this area has a budget of $12.3 million. As part of this budget, we are actually abolishing 5 vacant positions that were deemed unnecessary, which will save us $551,000 annually. Additionally, we have been working with the Bureau of Procurement to create a DPW-focused team that will work out of BOP, but work on DPW procurement requests specifically. So I want to thank the city's Chief Procurement Officer, Adam Manny, for his support in responding to our requests. This team will be a major benefit to our operations, especially given the high volume of items that we process through the procurement office that are coming specifically from DPW. So with that, I want to thank the council for their attention. Our staff is here to answer any questions you may have, and we look forward to engaging with you this afternoon on the recommended fiscal year 25 budget. Thank you.
Thank you. We've also been joined by Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District member of the committee, Councilman Z. Cohen, 1st District. Council Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you all for your work that you do for the city and your recent process in securing your position as leader of DPW, one of the, as I mentioned, one of the most important agencies for our city. And I do specifically want to do a shout out for the people that I deal with directly in my district and the work that they continue to do, and they have been just very responsive to my office and everything that, you know, I submit to your office. And those people are Yolanda Winkler, Anthony Green, Anthony Mills, Marsha Collins, and Yvonne, of course, which has been around a while, and she continues to do a wonderful job. So I know that there are people that work under them, but because of their leadership, things have been moving within my district. So my first question, I know you had, it has been mentioned about your work that you're doing with graffiti removal. I guess the main question is, I know that you work hard in trying to get these things removed, but the next day or in a couple days, the stuff comes back up again. Is what kind of, you know, and we know that, you know, a lot of this work is done by, you know, active gang organizations and so on. Is there some kind of plan to, you know, just come back some kind of way? Because what the efforts that you're doing, it's really not showing that you are trying to get this nipped under the bud. Your response.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman. So you are absolutely correct. So, and there is also some form of frustration on the staff when the staff continue to come back to the same area and you see the same places. It's like your work at some point is not appreciated. We can look at some options working with, you know, whether it's done in private area or whether it's done in the right of way, and see if cameras is an option. You know, looking at work with HCD and see if that's something we could look at, and then if look at the cameras, maybe we can look at the cameras within the system that we have, within the police department, and everything else that is within the system that the city has. We'll look at that a little bit more and see if there is an opportunity to add to that. Anything anybody else wants to add?
Yep. I'll add a little bit to that. Thank you so much, Director, and thank you for the question, Madam VP. So as a part of this current set of city services sprints, we are focusing on graffiti removal. In addition to focusing on graffiti removal, we've convened a graffiti task force. I think Councilwoman Ramos joined one of the early meetings. So Tanya Miller Hall, who's the mayor's senior advisor for arts and culture, has been convening that working group, and it's made up of leaders from DPW, DHCD, but it's also made up of artists, graffiti artists, and members of the arts and culture community to really come together to provide a medium to long-term solution, and to also provide creative outlets and avenues for those folks who are participating in the graffiti arts. So we are looking to get some recommendations from that group to implement to help deter some of the graffiti that we're currently seeing. But we currently have an active working group on that.
Thank you for that update. Mr. Chair, is it 2 questions or 1?
We'll do 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the second question, so I know that you work hard in getting our vacant property clean and boarded, and sometimes there are instances where, and I know housing is kind of, you know, you wait to get your orders and work orders in through housing before you do what you do. But sometimes there's instances where there is city-owned property next to a privately owned property that you are boarding and cleaning, and then here's the city-owned property that is still terribly messed up. And we get the calls and the complaints from people on the block of, why are you getting us to do this when city-owned property is not being taken care of? How are we going to, you know, I guess correct that, that particular problem?
Again, I think the reason for it, or the approach would be, is to look for a 311. And we, in most cases, unless we go there and we say it, and the expectations of the staff is, if they see something, is to go ahead, add it to 311, add it to the list, but at the same time, to go ahead and address it while they're there in order to expedite the response. But again, it's unless we have it in a system that we could respond to, unless it's been asked of us, added to the system for our management staff to review and to look at, it'll be very difficult to track. So we welcome you and everybody else that is there to go ahead and add anything that they have to 311 so we can, from a management perspective, track it. And again, if we look at something and we see that is something else that is next to it, that is ignored, then management will have to talk to the staff and to deal with that issue at the time.
Okay, and I think we all do understand that housing does the first piece and takes the first initiative, but I bring both of these things up because, you know, these are things that make our city look terrible, ugly, unclean, like we're not doing anything, and we get all this negative publicity because of those flaws. So thank you for the update of you recognizing and working to try to, you know, do the best you can to correct that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Sion, there's a valve break on the 1900 block of South Hanover Street. Do we have an update on that?
I don't have an update, but I can check right now and see if I can get you something during the break or after the hearing.
I would advise doing that because I have an email from you on May 23rd saying we need to identify the valves that need to be closed in order to replace the leaking valve. Then schedule the work, including coordination with the contractor who is working on site. We cannot provide an update, an accurate schedule at this time, and that's from 11 days ago, and we still haven't heard back from you yet.
Okay, I'll get back to you.
In the next hour?
I will do my best to get back to you.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you, Director. I appreciate that. Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Congratulations, Mr. Syed. I know you're not fully confirmed, but congratulations on your elevation. We are excited to have you in this agency. I'm deeply concerned about worker safety within DPW, particularly our frontline workers in the sanitation department as well as the wastewater treatment facilities. During COVID, we saw a lot of folks that did not have even basic BPP. I think there was ultimately an effort to get better equipment and get masks and gloves and everything for the workers, but we continue to hear stories from both frontline workers as well as CUB and AFSCME about just a lack of safety and as well as sanitary conditions, particularly again in our wastewater facilities and in the solid waste department. Can you talk about how you are going to improve safety across the agency, particularly for our frontline workers?
Thank you, Councilman. With safety, it has really multiple impacts. The biggest impacts, obviously, in the human side of it and on the workers that we have. And it has also a fiscal impact on the operations, on the city as a whole. So when you start thinking about the investment, one of the first things we're looking at right now is looking for all the contractual aspect of it, whether we provide boots, gloves, helmets. We want to make sure everybody all the times is wearing the equipment that they needed to do. It is critical that we have safety officer, and those safety officers go to field and check on the field, while there is a supervisor or a foreman or a construction manager at the time. We will hold those people responsible if their people are not wearing the safety equipment that they needed to do, and at the same time holding the public in a safe manner too as well. So one of the main things we're gonna be doing Project Stat and City Stat. And within Project Stat and City Stat, safety will be measured as one of those conditions. You know, it's when people go on site, when supervisors go on site, they need not only to look at the project and check the project, but also make sure that everybody on the field, including the contractors themselves, are withheld to the same rules and regulations. So yes, we will be looking at that. We will be managing that. I'm not going to promise that all of that is going to change within months or even a year, but we'll make sure that is the management staff is held accountable for their workers as well.
No, and I appreciate that. I would like to see an effort to incorporate the voices of the workers themselves into that stat. I hear a discrepancy between what I hear from frontline folks as well as their unions and what I hear from management. And so I would really like to make sure that as we think about how to incorporate that feedback, how to engage and hold accountable our management structure for improving safety conditions, I would just hope that both our unions, but also just frontline workers themselves are a part of that process, and that we're not just talking about them, but their voices are centered.
I'd like to add one more thing. So we have a compliance meeting for each one of the bureaus once a week. And in this compliance meeting that we have, we ask the questions about certain things. So some of the issues that it comes, and we're working, as Richard mentioned it, we're working with procurement and procuring all the needed equipments, all the needed boots, all the needed tools that the workers require. So we're hoping, but at the same time, we're monitoring how fast can we provide those issues to it. And the moment we provide the workers with it is the expectations of the workers to be adhering to those rules and regulations.
Director, if I can jump in as well too. Councilman, thank you for that question. We've recognized it too within the leadership team over the past year how important our employee safety is. What we've done as a leadership group is combine and meet together on a regular basis. We talk about any kind of safety issues that we're hearing from our staff. We're sharing best practices across bureaus so that we can pick up the best information and implement that across the board. I want to give a quick shout out to our bureau head, Craig Jeter, who's been with us almost a full year. It'll be a full year next month. But Craig recognized that immediately as he came in and started ingraining that within his daily meetings with all of his chiefs, with all of his supervisors about employee safety. He and I used to do ride-alongs together when he first started, just driving around and going around following crews. We'd stop them, we'd talk about, you did this right, you did that wrong, let's do a spot check and go through that list. But really what he was doing is really trying to build that into the culture in DPW, especially in the Bureau of Solid Waste, making sure that we're all watching, we're all invested in you. We all want to make sure that everybody who comes in every single day is going home the same way that they came in, that we're eliminating accidents, and that your health and safety for our employees are our utmost top responsibility. I want to give credit to Andrea Bowie, who really heads up all of our safety compliance efforts. She and her team have just done an incredible job of going out to all of our facilities, making connections with all the plant managers, direct points of contact, being that critical resource. So if there's items that they need, that we can help and procure that, we can help and get that implemented from the administration side. So to be honest, it's almost a daily conversation that we have within all of our groups about employee safety and making sure that we're addressing all of those outstanding issues that have been left over from years ago to making sure that we're taking care of our employees.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Luna. And again, thank you for your leadership during when you were interim director. I really appreciate you. We'll continue to say, hope that CUB and AFSCME and the workers themselves are in those conversations because, again, there is a gap between what I've heard from management and what I'm hearing from frontline folks. So appreciate that and look forward to following up with you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We've also been joined by Councilwoman Felicia Porter, 10th District. Mr. Sion, I have an update from the following day from you on May 24th. DPW field crews and contractors are busy with other water shutdowns and repairs. We are tentatively scheduled to replace the valve next Friday, May 31st. However, today one of our contractors will be on site to try and tighten the valve and stop the leak until we make permanent repair. I don't believe we've had a subsequent update. Do you have an update?
I just checked, and I had a notification that we were out there on Friday, but I'm confirming that with our staff.
Thank you. I'll circle back. Councilman Conway?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you, Director. I'll start here. So last year, after the budget process, we moved $250,000 toward zero waste work, really to help continue to move that work forward. I'm curious, how have we spent that money?
So I'll start it off and then I'll also call up our waste diversion staff if they want to add in any extra details. So thank you, Councilman, for allocating that and pushing that through the council. Thank you to the council as well for designating the $250,000. So these funds are actually being transferred over to the Civic Fund. They're really our strongest partner in helping move money towards some of these special projects. So these were deposited into our Civic Fund account back in January of this year. They're actually being used to support the food scrap collection for residents, including the purchase of food scrap bins and other giveaway items, to host our zero waste and composting workshops, and to host food waste reduction events, support the expanded food scrap drop-off locations, and to do a circular economy benchmark assessment. Those are essentially all of the items that we were hoping to get out of the 250, but it's really a credit to our waste diversion staff, Office of Waste Diversion staff, who've just been doing some incredible work for us and making sure that we're getting the right information out to the community. You may have seen our monthly emails that go out from that office, and then just highlights all of the different programs that they're implementing, just like the reusing the textiles that we had implemented earlier this year, and all of the best practices in terms of recycling. I know I said a lot, but I'll pause right there in case staff wanted to add in anything additionally.
Hello, Sophia Hussein, Zero Waste Manager. Richard did a great job covering most of the activities. As we said, the funds were made available in January, so we were kind of on a tight timeline to get them spent out in time. So we're using the Civic Fund as our fiscal administrator. And I can give you some stats on one of the events that we hosted. We hosted a food waste reduction event. And we were able to rescue over 550 pounds of food and engage with over 135 individuals. We hosted a smoothie bike, and we had 40 smoothie bike riders and made about 65 smoothies in that time, as well as hosted and supported 15 vendors in the Baltimore area. So that's one of the events that we've completed with the funding. But yeah, we're looking forward to working with the rest of it and appreciate the allocation last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, for those that watch Taxpayers Night, probably half the people, if not more, we're talking about zero waste, and efforts to get us off of the incinerator is our major response for dealing with waste. So this is a huge, huge priority, I think, for people who are watching these hearings and watching what we do as a council and as a city. I just want to make sure we don't forget that. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars expanding our landfill all the time. If we don't have a zero waste solution, we're going to continue to do that. And we know there's only so much land that you can fill at a certain point. So I'm curious, you mentioned the money wasn't made available until January. Why was that?
There seemed to have been some confusion on where it was located in the budget. And so that is when we were notified by finance that it had deposited into DPW's overall accounts. I'm not sure what the process is exactly.
So I'll attempt to respond here, and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong. So the majority of the council commitments actually came through carry forward, and so that process, of course, doesn't take place until we do closeout, and so that money likely wouldn't have been made available until about October or so, and then DPW chose to use the Civic Fund as a fiscal agent in order to get this money out to community organizations. And so then that has to go through the BOE process to make the transfer through the Baltimore Civic Fund. So there are multiple processes at play. There's the availability of the funds through carry forward. Then once those funds become available in the DPW budget, it's the transfer to the Civic Fund, which also has to go through the BOE process. So give or take, you're talking 3 or 4 months before those dollars would become available.
Yeah, I didn't realize when we moved the money over that it would take so long to actually spend it. I was a little bit disappointed by that, if I'm being honest. I was really hoping that we could do a lot more in order to help further inform this budget. My hope is that 250 is the start, and that we could prove some progress so that we come back this budget and we'd be talking 500, $1 million or more.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. I think, and I know the agency appreciated getting some additional funding to put towards their zero waste efforts. I think that they do have some pretty significant data because they do this work outside of that 250K. And so they have some data, I think, on some of the work that they've been able to do and the impact that they've been able to create. So unfortunately, we may not have data related to the transfer from last year, but I think the department has data that we might be able to provide you if you're interested in seeing the impact of our zero waste efforts.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you. My next question is, I noticed that the Wheelabrator, Bresco, is going to see expenditures increase by 37% to nearly $4 million. What is that increase about? Why is it going up so much? This is on page 288.
Councilman, that is primarily driven by the increase in tipping fees, and that, so tipping fees are projected to be up by $3.7 million in fiscal '25, and that brings the budget in line with the actual trends that we saw in fiscal '23 and fiscal '24.
Is there any way that we could, probably too late now, but, my thought is, are there opportunities for us to put that money into zero waste efforts so that we can wean ourselves off of the incinerator? Once again, too late now. We're a captive audience because we don't have the systems in place. But have we thought much about that?
We'll take a look at it and see what we have available and what kind of activities we could do if that money becomes available at some point.
Yeah, I think, we know we have our contract with the incinerator, a 10-year contract that will expire. And we will continue to have to invest in that incinerator in order for it to handle the amount of trash that we're burning. So we're going to continue to see those tipping fees increase. And so before we get to those points, it'd be great if we had a system that can divert those wastes. And a lot of that's going to be educating. A lot of it's going to be making sure that we have robust systems for recycling and composting. So, I'm saying this as calmly as possible, but there's a real sense of urgency. We have a clock that we started, right before this council. So I would love to see some effort there.
Just adding to it, actually, that is, we're looking at the tipping fees, and we're looking at the tipping fees in Baltimore City compared to the surrounding areas. I mean, we're probably one half of Baltimore County in terms of a number, and less than any of the surrounding areas. So there is an opportunity here to kind of think about it and look at tipping fees and see where we need to be with that and use that money into zero waste. And
Okay.
And I'll just add a little bit more. I appreciate the point here, and I think we are absolutely focused on this effort. I think with the work that we're going to be doing around the compost station at the Eastside Transfer Station, that there will be an opportunity for us to start to shift where we focus our efforts. So I think with the new composting facility coming online and some of the additional work we're doing, that we will be more thoughtful and intentional about how that impacts us being able to reduce our reliance on the incinerator.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Dorsey.
That's what I'm asking about. What are we doing to get that composting station up and running? We got a $4 million grant from the EPA last year. It has a 3-year timeline to it. We expected to get $12 million from the state. We didn't get that money, and we don't have a replacement for it in the plan so far as I can tell. And there are other various recycling expenditures that have been planned in previous years' capital budgets that are zeroed out or put off to further out into the future. So we're like actively backing away from being able to do more zero waste stuff. So how are we going to get this composting facility off the ground?
looking at the funding, we look at what we have right now, what we're putting into that facility so far, and adding some additional funding in the future years will probably allow us to get that within, starting the construction within 2 years? 2 to 4 years. So based on the plans, based on the funding that we have at this point, that's what we be looking at.
Based on the funding that we have, meaning we have only the $4 million from the EPA grant and nothing else?
Yep.
I can take that, Sophia Hossain, Zero Waste Manager. So one of the things that we did in designing the compost facility is that we designed it in a modular way. Right now, the funding, the $4 million that we will be receiving from the EPA is funding the facility to 50% diversion capacity, which is estimated at about 12,000 tons per year. The full estimated site capacity is 24,000 tons, but the way that we have ideally selected the equipment and added the solar component to the energy of the facility is to improve its sustainability and to also kind of insulate its development as it relates to the East Side Transfer Station. We've also thought about how we can work our way up to a Tier 2 facility. So there's various tiers for facilities and various permits that you have to get from MDE, but the lower tiered facilities, Tier 1, for yard waste composting, for example, require less infrastructural tie-in.
I'm sorry, the what? Waste composting? Facility?
Yard waste.
Yard
so
waste.
leaves.
If you could speak like just a little bit more slowly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I talk fast when I'm nervous. A Tier 1 facility.
Please don't be nervous. You're not on the hot seat today.
Okay.
Just take a deep breath.
Thank you.
You want to take a chair?
No, I'm okay. Thank
You
you.
want some water?
I appreciate it.
It's going to be all right. I promise.
Thank you. So a Tier 1 yard waste facility requires less infrastructural tie-ins, such as stormwater management, et cetera. So if we start at a Tier 1 facility while the East Side Transfer Station is coming up to full development, we'll still be able to divert some organic waste, even if it's not food waste, in the short term until we have the East Side Transfer Station fully funded and developed. So there is some resiliency built into the project plan and the equipment, et cetera. Our kickoff for the design process actually starts tomorrow. So things are underway.
Baltimore doesn't have a great track record of projecting its solid waste, future solid waste. So, for example, when the city bought the the Quarantine Road property in the late 80s, and it projected a certain amount of solid waste would be getting dumped there on a day-to-day basis. And literally from day one, we were exceeding this by an order of magnitude, so much that in 1992, the city council passed an ordinance saying that you could not dump recyclable or compostable materials at Quarantine Road explicitly for the purpose of preserving the life of that landfill. So we didn't have a good projection then, specifically dealing, I would say specifically isolating out yard waste. And when the department came before the council a few months ago with the solid waste management plan, the department didn't have any accounting then for how much seasonal yard waste we are incinerating today because we can't landfill it. So if we're planning for, if we think that 12,000 tons is the potential for 50% diversion of compostable materials, how do we know that that's something that we have and can produce, or that we aren't going to have way more than that and still be falling short in what we're developing for composting?
So the total generated organics from the residential sector is approximately 100,000 tons per year, and that's based on, I believe, a 2017 waste sort that we did, which is in task 0 or 1 of the Less Waste, Better Baltimore reports. I can get back to you with the exact numbers, but that's kind of the target that we're using in terms of estimating how much composting capacity we need for the residential sector. Within that sort, it does break it down between yard waste and food waste, but I can't recall those numbers off the top of my head right now. But that's what we're using to kind of inform our capacity. Also, there is the food diversion mandate that's in place at the state level that requires large-scale food waste generators to divert their organic waste if they are within 30 miles of a composting facility that has capacity. And by bringing this facility online, that will trigger the law into effect for a lot of Baltimore-based businesses. And so even if we aren't able to divert the waste from the residential sector or from DPW's routes immediately, we do anticipate that we will be generating enough organic waste to fill the facility.
All right, so I'm trying to understand how to close this gap. If we're fully able, well, what we just mentioned was if we're building out to 50% capacity of what we think that we can process, that's only 12,000 12,000 tons per year processed. And if we are planning for 100%, then that's 24,000 tons per year. But we've got an estimate of 100,000 tons, and so that doesn't sound like 0% waste. That sounds like 76% waste. That doesn't sound like those two things aren't the same. How are we bridging that gap?
So this is one of what was recommended is 4 decentralized composting facilities to be located around the city at various capped landfills, was originally the intention that was laid out in Less Waste, Better Baltimore. We did complete a capped landfill assessment to determine which of those capped landfills could support composting facilities, and only 2 out of the 4 that were investigated were feasible or viable for potential future development. So one of those is Boley's, and I would have to look to see which other one made it into the final stage. So, but what you're saying is, how do we fill the gap if this is 12,000, an eighth of total potential residential food waste, up to a quarter diversion when it's built out at full scale? What do we do with the rest? We're hoping to build more facilities and also look at potential regional partnerships to be able to work with the surrounding counties who have more land available, where we could develop a larger scale facility, kind of like what they have in PG County.
Okay, I just want to keep our eyes on the prize here. Zero waste is zero waste. That means there's nothing left over, and we don't have a plan yet for that. But let me just come back to my original question. When are we going to have a composting facility of some scale up and running?
So as you mentioned earlier, the EPA grant period is 3 years. We are in an engineering process that will allow us to receive the funding. So we anticipate it'll take the full 3 years to build if we receive that funding, hopefully later this year, maybe by end of 26, 27.
26, 27.
Yep. And Councilmember, I just wanted to provide an update on the funding. So we actually had about 500,000 in the FY24 CIP for the Eastside Transfer Station, and then we have another 750,000 in this year's CIP for the project.
Thank you. I want to ask about something that was, thank you, that was brought up in kind of the initial presentation, or tangentially at least. You mentioned investigating 24 or 25 of the highest consuming vacant properties. The flip side of that is properties that are showing no consumption, but where we don't necessarily know if there's actually no consumption or it's just not metered. We looked at this a month or so ago. We looked at, I think it's like 2,500 properties in the city that have an active billing account but have zero consumption showing. I wasn't happy when I looked at that list and saw that it's categorized in a bunch of different ways, and many of them are not categorized properly, right? We've got commercial properties that were categorized as like essential properties, like as if they're hospitals or schools or things like this. We had one building at Morgan State that was categorized as essential because it's a school, but another building at Morgan State categorized as state property. These categories are non-overlapping, and you're either in one or the other. So the kind of lack of consistency just in how we account for this or manage our understanding of this is not inspiring of confidence that we even know that there's actually no consumption happening here. And of course, this came to me as a question because I had multiple instances where constituents had space pipes in place of a meter for 3, 4, 5, 6 months at a time, where there's just water flowing, not being consumed. And of course, we had a pretty serious problem with the Ritz-Carlton a few years ago, where there was no consumption being billed for an extensive period. And I know how that resolved. I don't want us dealing with this at any scale in the city. I want to get some confidence from you guys that we don't have way more accounts out there that are not being billed simply because there's no meter in place, but there's water flowing into the house.
No, thank you, Councilman. And I appreciate, too, the information you had sent us and taking a look at the data. We still owe you a meeting, so the project manager that I had assigned to that, after our last exchange, he had to take some extended leave, so he actually just returned to the office last week. So we'll work in getting something scheduled with your office to go over that data. I think this all ties back in, all of the improvements that we've made in the billing system and CSSD. A lot of the work was just doing audits of all of our existing accounts. And part of that process is looking at GIS data, is looking at mapping. We've had to do multiple extensive DES audits on multiple different accounts to making sure that we're capturing all of those properties and that there's meters attached with each property, the ERTs are assigned correctly, and then everything's in our billing system. So we've actually done a lot of extensive work in going through that process to making sure we're capturing all of the accounts that we know about and that we exhaust our full resources to doing it through the DES audit first before we actually go and send out crews into the field to do the in-person investigations, which just take a little bit more time. But we're happy to kind of walk you through some of the work that we've done on that part as part of our meeting that we'll get set up with you, and then go over those existing accounts to take a look at those properties that you've noticed that we're on that no consumption list. It's most likely it's just requires us getting that scheduled, getting a work order assigned so that we can send out an investigator out into the field to go and take a look at the specific properties.
How many field investigations can we do in a day?
How many?
Yeah.
I'd have to look up the number from in our meter shop staff and get back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to know how many meter inspections or investigations we can do in a day in the field, because, I mean, if it's 25, with 1 or 2 people doing this, that's 100 days effort. Like, that's not that big an undertaking in a city with 13,000 employees, right? I feel like that's something that's manageable to just go through and do a on-the-ground assessment of this.
No, that's understandable. So yeah, we'll get that number for you and take a look at seeing how many investigators we have. We've actually been making more hires in our meter shop staff. So that was actually one of the divisions that had some of our higher number of vacancies when you just look at the percentage of filled positions versus vacant positions. So our chief mariner, Nick Mariner, who oversees the meter shop, has been aggressively going out and trying to recruit and getting positions filled. I know he's been doing a number of different interviews over the past recent weeks. So our staffing levels overall for the meter shop should be rising. So I just want to make sure I get you the most accurate number for his current staffing levels.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
A request for the committee. DOT started sending out on Thursdays or Fridays every week a list of weekend contacts that breaks down like 15 different categories of services that DOT provides. And if you need to contact somebody over the weekend, here's the right person to contact. I know I texted Yvonne at like 7 o'clock on Saturday morning or 8 o'clock on Saturday morning about something. I don't want to be texting Yvonne at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. I want to be texting whoever you guys have told me is the right person to be contacting on Saturday morning or Sunday morning. Can you guys start getting out a weekly email to tell us who to contact each weekend, whoever's going to be on duty for that specific weekend for specific purposes?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to follow up on the question that I asked earlier about the 37% increase in payments to Bresco. And you guys said it was the tipping fee, but according to the contract, their tipping fee is only going to increase about 2.5%. So it has to be more than the tipping fee.
Well, the one thing to note, the budget, this has been historically
Yeah.
under budgeted, so we're bringing the budget up in line with the contract. That,
So what you're saying is we tip more than we have budgeted
yes. This
historically.
In the last, at least the last 2 fiscal years, this has been under budgeted, which has been contributing to a deficit in the department's budget. So in fiscal 25, we're bringing the budget up to actual spending trends from the last, recent fiscal years.
Got it. Would you be able to share with me our total tipping amounts going back, let's say, 10 years?
Yeah.
But, so each year?
I can, for fiscal 2014 actual through fiscal 24 projected.
Yes.
Okay, I can
Yeah,
provide that.
that'd be helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know my colleagues have had a great conversation on the zero waste, and I absolutely support everything that they've asked. I know that zero waste is also not just, diversion of composting. We're almost done with my bill that I'm working on for the last couple of years on deconstruction, and we did pass in the last round of the building code that the new percentage that we have to divert of non-hazardous waste from deconstruction, demolition and contract and work on properties. So we just have to operationalize that. So the 70% is what we're now mandating to be able to divert, which is really good. It's just we haven't operationalized it yet. So I'm hoping to do that very soon. And then, of course, the state, we need to get some help from the state on a bottle deposit bill. Wouldn't that be amazing? And I know that there's some other legislators working on that. So hopefully with sort of all of these coming together, we can get a really good program of diverting waste and finally shutting down the incinerator. But my question related to the incinerator is, we're not the only ones who use the incinerator. Baltimore County uses it, Howard County uses it, some of our other partners use it. And so what conversations have we had with our regional partners to say, we don't want to do this anymore. So like you guys need to work on getting your trash out of our city. So I think that there was an effort at the state level to create a working group around this, and I don't think that passed. So I'm curious where we are on that conversation. We're not,
Yeah,
it looks
we
like.
actually, we didn't have any conversation, but it absolutely makes a lot of sense. That is, at this point, as we invest in more resources in order to eliminate it, that we'll start having conversation with our neighbors about.
I think we need to have those conversations yesterday. So we can follow up on that, hopefully through, working with our partners. And I think there have been conversations about it. I just don't know what they are. So, so turning to a separate subject on my second question is relative to the water governance work that is being done. So my first question is, I don't see in the executive summary under the revenue estimates, the way that the formula currently works now with our agreement with Baltimore County and our other surrounding counties is that they can set the rate that they charge their residents for water consumption, and then it's lower than what we charge. And then the county is supposed to give us the difference between what is actually collected by the ratepayers, I just want to enunciate ratepayers, and then also the actual costs of providing the service, plus any capital, any of the half of the capital piece, is my understanding. So has Baltimore County paid us?
You go ahead.
Yes, we're actually we just closed out fiscal year 23, so we're in the midst of the true-up process for close of fiscal year 23. That would be the most recent and current year, but everything before that has been up to date.
And so do we see that in the revenue projections here, Laura, or is that in the enterprise?
So that, those revenues live in the enterprise fund. So if you're in the executive summary, if you look at the water utility fund on page 72, you can see that the metered revenue is broken out by neighboring jurisdictions. So we can see the projected revenue amounts for Carroll County, Baltimore County, Howard County, and Hartford County.
Mm-hmm. And so there's some deficits here. Or is that just those are just dollar changes, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yes, those are dollar changes.
Change, okay, great. I still think that we need to restructure how that's all working, and I think that was kind of the point of the coming up with the participating in the regional water task force work. There's still a lot more work to do. The two recommendations that came out of that work that still need more exploring, so it's not solid. One being creating something completely new with all of our regional partners, and one kind of renegotiating that agreement. And I think Director or Acting Director, you said in your confirmation hearing, you've been very clear, as I think the council has been clear and the mayor's been clear, that we want to keep our asset. And that is extremely important to all of us. And so I guess I just need to say that during the hearings that the meetings of the task force that I attended, first of all, we, the council, are completely shut out of that process, and it's very disappointing to us. And we shouldn't be, because anything that changes has to come before us to begin with. So I'm hoping that the next set of the conversations around that, we can be more involved. I know we weren't assigned to the new task force, but we should be more involved. Secondly, is that it wasn't clear to me when we were listening to those hearings that the city's advocacy was such that you wanted to keep the asset. And I think it's important that, when we're in these meetings, look, something has to change, because what's working is not working. I totally get it. And I will be clear that, there is something to be said for working, regionally. But it wasn't clear to me from hearing during those task force meetings that DPW actually wanted to keep the asset. We never heard from anybody. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand what the position of the city is relative to this, and how we can be partners in making sure that change needs to happen, no question about it, but that we can work together to make sure that we're getting the right thing for our city.
So I've been working for the city for a long period of time, and as I said before, this city is ours. So we lost the Port of Baltimore, and that was a big loss. We lost the airport, and that was a big loss as well. This is the last real important asset that the city has, and I do believe that's power. That's power that create the regional importance for the city of Baltimore moving forward. So as we look for other options, hopefully we'll find other options, but those options will be within the reign of Baltimore keeping that asset. Leave it at that.
And thank you so much for that, Director. The only thing I wanted to add is that the work continues. So we had another bill at the state, which would allow for us to continue the water governance task force work, which will be continuing over the course of the next couple of years. And so the conversation isn't done, the work isn't done, and although the director was absolutely clear, I just want to be clear for everyone watching that from Mayor Scott's point of view and from his perspective, we want to 100% own and maintain our water utility. So there should be no mistake about the city's stance on the utility. I think the other thing that I would offer is that during those conversations, this was about hearing from industry experts. Right? So we put together a mix of course, leadership from the state, but also leadership from WSSC, all of the major players in the space, and obviously the other jurisdictions that rely on our utility also had an opportunity to appoint to that task force. But this was about learning from industry experts, bringing together our consultant as well. And so this is a learning process for us, and the work, again, will continue, but to be absolutely 100% clear, we plan on continuing to own and maintain that asset.
And so following up on that, what is going to be the further dynamic relative to, there's the task force, the new task force still needs to be appointed. That hasn't been done yet. And so when will that happen? And can we get a commitment that the council will be involved in some way, whether it's appointing one of us to that, which is, it's actually not in the legislation, so I don't think you can, or to, we did ask Mr. Chair, the chair of the task force, to come before us a couple of times, which was great. I think there's got to be some more formal discussions, and maybe we can't answer that right this second, but we can certainly make sure that we are much more in a formal way. I kind of inserted myself, like I do, inserted myself in some of those meetings, but I don't think, it wasn't formalized. And so I think that we need to sort of figure out how that would work, but also just for transparency for the public, since people ask us questions about what's going on, and if we're not informed, we don't know.
Yep, thank you for that. I will absolutely share that feedback with the mayor. I think as we did with the last task force, each of the jurisdictions were able to appoint a number of members to the body, and so we will likely, of course, share appointees with our peer jurisdictions. I think what is key and what is important is that we have experts on that panel. And so, where possible, we want to allow for other voices, but we also really want industry leaders and industry experts to advise us on kind of the next steps and the recommendations. But I'm happy to have conversations with leadership in the council about ways for you all to stay up to speed and updated on the progress in the work that's happening. The other thing that I think is important is this is a public body, right? Like, you were able to stop in and attend those meetings. Also, I think we posted, if we did not formally stream them, but you could actually go online, look at the minutes, right? It's an open meeting. And so there's opportunities from anyone from the public to attend those meetings as well. So we will continue, as this work continues, we will look for more ways to keep the public engaged and updated on the progress of the Water Governance Task Force.
And I'll just make a formal request that we'll just follow up to make sure that, we have those discussions about the ways that the council can be informed and involved. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Porter?
Chair Costello, if we
please,
have an
Director.
update for you. We have an update for you.
Please.
So I texted you, Councilman, that the 20-inch main over at Hanover Street, we were out there on Friday, but it turns out that we need to shut down a portion of the 20-inch water main in order to replace that one valve. So that's what we're doing now, is coming up with a plan to how can we shut down that 20-inch force main and reduce the number of affected customers. What is the timeline? We're working on that timeline now.
So there's a 20-inch main which needs to be
shut down so that we can close off the water service and replace the valve that you had questions about.
How long does the valve replacement take?
That's only a few hours, but the actual shutdown of the water main is what takes, the 20-inch water main is what takes the time.
How much time does it take to temporarily shut down a 20-inch main?
It's more a question of what time, because that 20-inch water main is a rather large main that feeds quite a few services. So when is the best time during the nighttime to shut it down? And that's what we're working on right now.
Generally speaking, what's the best time to shut down a 20-inch main that services residential and commercial?
Usually at nighttime.
Can we send a crew out tonight, overnight, to shut down the main and replace the valve?
I'll see what we can do. Yes.
Thank you, Director. I appreciate it. Porter?
Thank you. Director, I want to transition to the expedited reimbursement program for the SOS program. Looking at Table 2.4, we noticed that in fiscal years 18, 19, and 20 and 21, amounts have been paid out, but for fiscal years 22 and 23, there currently have been no reimbursements that have been paid out from that program. Is that correct?
So I have the latest numbers here from staff. I'll start with the reimbursement program. So fiscal year 23 amount paid to date was $0. Fiscal year 24 amount paid to date was $14,842.12. For the SOS program, fiscal year 23 amount paid for cleanups was $77,359.61. And for fiscal year 24, to date, it's been $43,704.59.
Okay. This actually is different from the table that was in the MCD quarterly report, number 26. So you said it was 77,000 for fiscal year 23?
On the SOS program, correct?
On the SOS program. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Okay. If you can send that to me in writing, if I can make that a formal committee request, please, for that to be updated. Secondarily, I wanted to talk through the trash collections. I'm going to transition to trash collection. Have you all been using the Rubicon system for routes throughout the city?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So currently from my spreadsheet, we've sent over 56 missed recycling to you all. I wanted to know how you all kind of generate those routes and how you all fine tune for a QA to make sure those routes are optimally aligned with actually what's in the neighborhoods.
I'll start first high level, and then I'll turn it over to our bureau head, Craig Jeter. But just want to say, give credit to the staff for looking at this process over 2 years ago. As we've noted a couple different times, when Mayor Scott came into office, our staff was still using paper routes to go and pick up collections, both for trash and recycling. So having Rubicon come on board, digitizing everything, having the right software has just made tremendous improvements overall to our operations. As we got closer to weekly recycling in March, we actually started testing out some of the recycling routes on the newer routes over a series of different weeks. So first, after we designed the routes, we just had the drivers go and drive them. We didn't actually do any kind of collections. We just wanted to kind of see how everything was at. As we got closer to weekly recycling in February, we started running those routes with staff and picking up the recycling materials. And that really helped us better gauge the effectiveness of all of those routes. And as we were going through the process, we did notice that, there's some things a computer might miss that we'll pick up with our eyes when we're actually out in the field. And so our staff, our supervisors noted all of those items. We'd redesigned some of those routes. We constantly were making tweaks to making sure that our missed collections weren't going above our standard number. When we implemented weekly recycling, we did have slight increases in just the number of missed pickups. And we were seeing that across the board. It wasn't just one area in particular. But kudos to the staff, because within each week, they've constantly gone out and made adjustments to those routes to going up and following up and making sure that we're collecting all the materials. I was looking at the most recent numbers recently, and I believe it's for the past 4 or 6 weeks. Maybe it's more than that. We've always have met our mark in recycling collections in terms of missed pickups, and that's been the same with trash. So we've actually been doing quite well, especially recently, now with the new routes. And I think too, with the staff getting more familiarized, remember, we did have over 35 new drivers, 75 workers. So we did have a high number of staff that were new to the operation. So for some of those people and individuals, getting used to the routes, getting more familiar with the areas that they're servicing, each week we've seen an increase in performance overall from the team.
I definitely want to shout out to Yvonne for answering my text messages over the weekend, early in the morning, for missed recycling and trash. And I hear you when you say that you all are kind of fine-tuning those routes. well, for me in South Baltimore, we're not seeing it as effectively. It's consistently where my staff is sending 311s to follow up to Director Zaid. We've sent to Yvonne, particularly in that Brooklyn and Curtis Bay community. So if we can see kind of those effectiveness rates that you mentioned kind of broken down by district, I think that would really show a much more clear picture of kind of where the route optimization needs to happen and where it should be focused on.
I'd just like to add one more thing to it. When Richard just touched on it, and that is the fact that is we have brand new staff on board. Looking at the vacancy rate throughout the city or throughout the organization is roughly 22% to 24%. The vacancy rate went all the way down in solid waste, down to 8%. So that difference in the vacancy rate, you're looking at it. This is brand new people coming in. And as they do and as they work through the process, there are some hard lessons and making minor mistakes in the process of doing it. So
And Director, I completely agree with that. However, when we have, there should be, I mean, if there's a new crew every single week, they should be able to follow the route optimization that you set forth. If it's not a workforce issue, then it's a training issue on the back end. And so either way, there's something that we have to kind of really focus in on. Even if there's new crews, they should be able to kind of follow the route optimization that you all set forth. Thank you.
Councilwoman Porter, was that a formal request?
Yes. Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Councilwoman Porter. I'll work with the team, and we can possibly follow up with our consultants if we believe that you're still having consistent issues in South Baltimore, just to take a look at our routes to see if there's some updates that we can make. Thank you. I'll save my questions for the next round.
Can you please repeat the request?
Sure. The request was for us to look at the route optimization by council district, the percentage that you just mentioned. Is that clear? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Middleton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we're still on the subject of waste disposal and reuse, the 664 waste reuse and disposal page, and I see you kind of reference some statistics and things that are going on at Northwest Transfer Station, which is basically in the center of redevelopment of Park Heights. I noticed that your performance measures for FY24, the target was 20%, and then your FY25 is 20%, which is basically saying that you're trying to maintain that performance measure instead of trying to increase it, since a lot of the conversation is trying to improve our environment. Why can't the target be 25%?
I could take that one. And no, that's a great question, Vice President. As I mentioned in the presentation, the tonnage number 2 for the total tonnage that's collected for recyclable materials is actually going to go down for next fiscal year in terms of target number. And we did that more purposefully because that's what we're actually seeing in terms of the actual number of recyclable materials that we're collecting. And so here on this slide, or here on this performance measure, that 20% would just, we're right now just going to maintain that percentage number. But as I noted in the presentation, the goal is to increase both the percent collected, the total tonnage collected year to year. And I think we're going to be able to do that based off of the improvements that we made overall to the service, adding the additional crews, getting the new trucks, and then the increase in community outreach and communications. And Tara Brown, who leads our communications office, her and her team have done a tremendous job of creating new marketing material, putting up billboard advertising. There was a jingle that went out in terms of recycling, but just overall, just increasing that level of communication so that the public is fully aware that, hey, this is the best way to do it. Make sure you're cleaning out your materials, you're containing it, you're curbing it, and really utilizing the full advantage of those blue cards. So as we continuously push out that level of information, I would imagine, and I anticipate us seeing that those numbers for both the total tonnage and the percentage to increase.
And just to add to that, the Northwest Transfer Station, as my colleague Councilman Cohen had really kind of mentioned, working conditions and so on within the organization, that particular transfer station, even on the outside, it's on a main thoroughfare, Ricestown Road, and even on the outside, and it's near very close proximity to homeowners and 3 or 4 churches. The place has not changed on the outside in over 25 years. And as revitalization is taking place around the city and particularly in that community, there needs to be some attention on the entrance of that area as well. And things like that help people in the area to appreciate things like recycling, just from the aesthetics of what the outside and entrance into the facility looks like. So if you put some time into really making the entrance and outside of that place look presentable and really not even look like a disposal site, would really, it's simple things like that that can really help support your mission, especially in an area where people have struggled for 40, 50 years in just trying themselves to keep food on the table. So I put that out there because everyone knows about Northwest Transfer Station, where it is, what it does, and the surface of that facility has just been neglected, and even the street, you know, I've kind of also alluded to some of these things with transportation because they're, you know, responsible for the street. So again, that's where partnerships and things come from, and it shows that the city cares about the neighborhood that station is in. So I'll give you a chance to comment about that facility.
Thanks to the administration and to the council. There is more investments in our solid waste facilities in the past 40 years than I have seen in a long period of time. It's a lot of money invested in those facilities, whether it's Bowley's Lane, transfer stations, taking care of the lockers. But your point here is an absolutely valid point as well, which is we need to take care of the outside of it and look what we can do in order to, from an appearance perspective, as aesthetics for the community as well, because it's in their neighborhood and representative of them as well. We'll take a look at it, we'll evaluate it, we'll see what we have in terms of options that we could do, knowing that we're gonna have limited funds at this point, and the need is huge, but the funds are limited. But we'll take a look at that, and thank you for that point.
And just so you know too, one of the churches that's in very close proximity was a church created by the mother of former Elijah Cummings. And, you know, it's just all those things are kind of, it's history there as well. So thank you for that. So the second question has to do with, again, I'm piggybacking on some of the information that Councilman Cohen had mentioned. And I think it's important because there seems to be a gap in staff communication between agencies and getting things out together because your staff does not know what's going on from, you know, you're such a big agency that there needs to be some kind of intercommunication between those offices to get certain tasks done too, if that explains what I'm trying to say. I don't know is there a plan to kind of help enhance your gaps in between your offices?
So it starts with me as the department head. And one of the things that I really done and will continue to do, within the past 2 months, I visited probably 20 of our sites. So I've been almost in all the large sites within, spoke to the people in there, and will continue to do so. And that is, the same expectations from the managers throughout. I know we have limited times, I know we're all working, I know we all have a lot of things to do, but I think we need to reach out, we need to be with the workers, we need to hear what they have to say, and go back and see what we need to do in order to make that situation or better for them and for us as a whole. And while we might not be able to listen and do everything that the laborers or the workers will refer to us, but at least we'll be able to communicate what directions we're going as an organization. And that will be one of the main things of us moving forward.
Does that include your administrative structure? I remember a question in the confirmation hearing. You had said that you were still discussing your administrative structure. You're still working on that, or?
Yes, we are still working on it. We haven't completed it yet, and when it's done, we'll share it with the administration, and then we'll share it with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Cullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you to Mr. Zaid and your entire team at DPW. I want to talk about the Back River Treatment Facility, which we know has long been a troubled facility. Was concerned that we recently, I think a couple months ago, there was, I believe, a $50 million contract before the Board of Estimates. This was before your time, but that brought in some private contractors to essentially do some of the biosolids work within that facility. Wanted to understand that decision, knowing that I know this is an administration that is deeply committed to investing in our own workforce, in Baltimore's workers. And so, again, this precedes your time as DPW director, but maybe for Mr. Luna, just want to understand why we made that decision, which to me signals a movement in the direction of privatization, which I know is not where we are going as a city, but as someone who thinks we really have to grow our municipal workforce, we really have to make these city jobs desirable for our people. I struggle to understand that decision, and would love to understand it from you all.
I'll start, and then Richard maybe can jump in after that.
Great.
So looking at the skill set that is required to do that type of work, and we have been for years, we have not done a good job in the past 20 years to get with the union to a level where we both on the same page in terms of what is the needed skill set for those employees. The skill set that is required in water and wastewater in those facilities require math, some minor chemistry to some degree. It's a lot of technical knowledge that those workers need to do. So there is a gap between the workers that we have, the workforce that we have, and the need. And for a long period of time, that need was just simply neglect. That has never been felt. At this point, being under compliance and knowing what we need to do, we need to fill that gap while we're committed now. We know there's big dollars, and the city administrator have been on us and said, we need to do something about it, and the mayor is the same way. But there is a transition period. And for the employees in that section, it takes 3 years for them just to get certified. And we need to plan for over 3 years. We probably need to plan for 5 years down the line to get most of the people that we need up to a certain point. We need to keep the compliance during that period of time. Keep the compliance, train the people, and one of the measures that we're gonna have to do is to see how year by year, how we're getting better at it. If we're not getting better at it after the second year and we still have the same number that are certified the year before, then we're not doing our job correctly. So we're gonna have to track it and we're gonna have to find out what it is. But at this point, I think the need is there to have that skill set by the contractor in addition to getting our people to where we need them to be.
And the director is absolutely correct in all of his points. I'll add on a few extra details too. If you go back to 22 and 23 as we're negotiating the consent decree for the wastewater treatment plants with MDE, and if you look at the final document, one of the first items that they note is that half of our staff were certified operators at the wastewater treatment plants. And that's obviously a huge concern, not just for us, but for the state. And so being able to contract out just for a short period of time to help and provide that necessary certified support to us is really critical for ensuring overall compliance for the plants. We've, since that contract was executed and the consent decree was initiated, we've also upgraded the salaries for all of our staff within the Water and Wastewater Bureau. Like I mentioned, that's really going to be a huge selling point for us in terms of going out, recruiting, and retaining some of the staff that we're really wanting to invest in. We've seen some increases so far. After we got that salary survey implemented, we actually hired, for the first time in over 2 to 3 years, a plant manager for Back River. That was a hard position for us to fill, but we were able to pull somebody from WSSC and bring in that level of experience that we had not seen come to us in some time. It was really because we implemented that new salary survey and we can pay people within market that we were able to attract some of that type of talent. As the director mentioned, we have a huge need in terms of our workforce, but we have the necessary training models in place like Be More Wise and our apprenticeship programs to get people in the door with limited to no experience, and within 3 to 4 years, get them through the training process so that they can take over and become the certified operators of both plants. And that's really the strategy that we're looking at right now. So our HR staff has done a tremendous job of getting our overall staffing levels up in solid waste. Now they're focusing on water and wastewater to ensure that we're filling all of those entry-level positions so we can get staff in the pipeline and that we can get people through this process, because it is going to take at least 3 years for some of those individuals. But within that 3 to 5 year time frame, you would see us taking over all of those responsibilities. And there's mechanisms within the contract so that if we exceed our expectations and are able to get enough staffing before that 5 year period, that we're actually able to come off the contract without any penalties or limited penalties in those later years.
No, and listen, I appreciate needing to stay in compliance with our consent decree. Obviously, that's critically important for the city. And, look, $50 million to $100 million, that is a large contract. And I think when you take steps in the direction of private contractors, it can be hard to wean off of it. I'll just say that I think it is an indictment, not of this administration, but of past administrations, that we did not invest enough in our workforce, that we're in this position where we are essentially contracting out for what should be in-house Baltimore City jobs. I do hope that we are moving aggressively, to your point, to both of your points, to get our folks trained up so that they can assume those positions and that we are not having to spend precious Baltimore City taxpayer dollars contracting out, undercutting our own labor force. But I think point made, but just want to really push us to not do that again, because again, I think it becomes this slippery slope where it is so easy to bring in cheap contract labor, and I think we see it in a lot of industries in not just our city, but in cities across the country. And we need to be growing our own workforce and investing in our own workforce. But again, appreciate your commitment to that. And again, thank you to both the former interim and the current director. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Dorsey?
Yeah, more about contractors. We were talking about Back River contractors, right? What about solid waste contractors? Do we have them, and are we relying on them, and to what extent? For solid waste or recycling? I've had some complaints from constituents who I've said, if you got an issue with this, please send me an email and I'll follow up and ask about it. I'm not aware of this, and then I never hear from them, so I don't know.
So your question is, to what extent are we using contractors, and are we going to?
Yeah, for solid waste.
Yeah, we
and
only
recycling.
use. Yeah, we have a contractor currently that is helping us in solid waste, collect the trash, and we only are using them through October of this year. And basically, that was, as we deemed it last year, kind of like a safety net as we rolled out to our return to weekly recycling. And as we get more vehicles in, our staffing numbers they're adequate for what we have. But as we get more vehicles in going into the fall, we're going to take those routes over that they're currently doing. So the contract currently that we have they will go away in October.
How many routes are they doing?
They have 5 trucks and about 21 routes.
And Councilmember, I'm sorry, let me just offer there. So when we started working on the return to weekly recycling, and I think I've mentioned this in my testimony, that it really was about the stabilization of solid waste, right? We started focusing on recycling and realized that we really need to focus on stabilizing solid waste. And as a part of that stabilization strategy, right now we have those contracts that end in October, and it is absolutely our goal to take on those routes. But there may need to be additional time allotted so that we can ensure that we are transitioning off of those contracts without disruption to city services. So again, the contracts right now end in October. It is our goal to take them over, but there may need to be an additional grace period because I have to ensure that there is absolutely no disruption in weekly recycling, and that may take a little bit longer. So I just want to clarify that the contracts do end, but we may need a little additional grace period.
And so, thank you. I appreciate this. I respect this. For clarification, we have these contractors doing explicitly solid waste refuse collection, or also recycling, or some of both?
Just trash, no recycling.
And are they on the same routes week to week?
Same routes every week.
Can you please provide the committee a list of those routes?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've explicitly had complaints about contractors not operating the same as well as our in-house staff. So I'd like to verify whether this is these are
Sure.
actually,
Yep.
in
We'll
fact,
get that to you.
contractors operating in my district on these routes.
And also, Councilmember, I do want to acknowledge, and again, when I talked about the stabilization of solid waste, this is the work, that we did, and it wasn't just about recycling, it was also street sweeping. And so I know we haven't gotten to street sweeping just yet, but we are actively looking at contractors to support around street sweeping because we've ordered, I think, at least 20 sweepers. Those sweepers won't get here for over a year, right? And so that's where contractors can come in and supplement our staff as well as vehicles while we have our vehicles on order. So it is never our goal to permanently outsource or contract for our work, but as a part of very intentional stabilization efforts, we have had to lean in on contractors. But again, there's an end in sight as we receive additional vehicles and as we hire up, which we've been able to do, as you can see through the work that we've done in solid waste with hiring. So I just want to acknowledge that there could be other spaces where we might contract out.
And are these contractors union contractors that we're using?
No, not for solid waste.
Not for solid waste? Okay. On this issue of street sweeping, how many operational street sweepers do we have right now?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
How many operational street sweepers do we have right now?
Councilman, you mean the vehicles, right?
Yes,
On an average, 14 to 17 possibly.
14 to 17.
I can add a little bit. So
Ca-
what
or
do we
hang on
have?
1 second, Director, if I
Sorry.
could jump in. When you say on average, you mean on a given day? I think the councilman may have been asking the total number of vehicles that are available in the fleet. Is that correct?
Sure.
Oh, well, the total that we have is 36, I believe, but we don't have that available to us daily though. So the average that's, I think this morning, it may be 20 vehicles were in the shop.
Gotcha. Okay. And I mean, that's pretty typical? I mean, they're just kind of in and out of the shop, in and out of the shop?
Currently, and that's just because of the age of the fleet.
Yeah. And so it's going to be another year before we get in, what did Faith just say? 20
Before we
more
get all of them, correct.
20 more, yeah. And just, because I don't understand the wear and tear day to day. When we get these brand new trucks, how much are they going to be on the street? To what extent are they going to be on the street before they're going to be in the cycle of being in and out of the shop week after week or whatever?
So we are coming up with a plan. We're working with DGS, and we're actually going to have driver training for each of these vehicles. There's some intricate maintenance piece that the driver would have to just, take care of to prevent it from being a minor breakdown into a bigger breakdown. Each time you get a new vehicle, whether it's a car, truck, something is new on it from the previous version of that. And same thing with these sweepers, they're very delicate, but the manufacturer is going to come in and hold a class for our drivers and show them the correct way to do the preventive maintenance, so these will last us a long time.
In addition, I'd like to add to that is the life cycle of a vehicle or the life cycle of a sweeper. When you're looking at it in our system, maybe 8 to 10 years replacement cycle, that is with the condition of our roadways and the years that it takes to replace a vehicle. Most of the market at this point and most of the jurisdiction, they look for 5-year cycle. So you're already 3 to 4 to 5 years, your vehicles are that late in the process. But your investment, and the investment this time in our fleet is tremendous. As we said, we're expecting 17 new vehicles within just the next year. We also ordered another 17 vehicles. So we're gonna have, in 2 years period, we expect to have probably 34 new sweepers that are within 2 to 3 years old. So we're gonna have a fleet that is gonna be all brand new. Now, the struggle with that or the challenge with that, when you have that vehicle or that fleet all the same age, guess what?
They all break at the same time.
That is exactly right. So we need to develop a life cycle that is a little bit shorter in order to be able to replace those sweepers that is gonna be always replenishable.
And just to get in the weeds, do our labor contracts give us room to be requiring the drivers to do whatever this particular form of maintenance is? I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen HAFA, like it's the basic. The Teamsters drive the trucks. They don't load the trucks. Do our drivers also perform the maintenance on the trucks?
I like to add one thing. We had a meeting with DGS where we agreed together, us and DGS, that DGS was going to start sending people on a spot checks to look at these things, just looking at it. And we asked actually for that. We asked DGS to look at spot checks, look at our facilities just before they leave, or if they go to fill up with gas or any of those issues. can we talk about that? Look at look at the machinery itself and make sure that it is done correctly.
Okay. But you did say the drivers.
Yeah, and if it has to be in their PD also, you know, yeah, to do that maintenance. But the manufacturer is still going to hold that class and show, you know, the basic stuff that let's say if the driver can't perform it or doesn't perform it because of what I just said, well, at least they know they can write it on their DVR, and they can turn it into the shop and say, okay, this is what needs to be done based on what the manufacturer showed us in the class, and not just wait for it to break.
Okay, I just, you know, I don't know all the details of when we hire a CDL driver, we're hiring somebody to drive the truck. I don't know that we're hiring somebody to inspect the truck and to do little things with the truck, monitor the truck in different ways and report on the condition of the truck. I just want to understand, is that within the scope of the union contract?
Yeah, pre-inspection and post-inspections are both required of the driver. Prior to get to the truck itself, that morning, he needs to look at the pre-inspection, fill it up, go post-inspection, and does it as well. Now, whether they do it or not, or the management is seeing it, I can't promise you that's happening every day. But that's what is required at this point.
Okay, and then my other question related to street sweeping is we rely very heavily on street sweeping, to my dismay, to meet our MS4 permit requirements. I think there are other ways we should be meeting our MS4 permit goals. I have argued extensively for this to no success. Are we I don't know, meeting our MS4 goals if we have only kind of this small fleet, or could we be using the money that we're using for street sweeping in the interim to get MS4 credits by other ways, like the ones I've suggested?
Looking at what we have at this point between street sweeping and stream restorations that are that's the biggest part that we could make the biggest impact at this point. I can't think at this point of anything.
I mean, we could be doing a lot of impervious surface conversion, and we're doing zero impervious surface conversion. We could be doing a lot of that. We have streets all over the city that are really, really dangerous because they're a lot wider than they need to be, and I'm sure DOT would welcome DPW contributing toward the cost of doing things that can alter those streets to make them safer by shrinking them down. You know, these are, in many cases, are on streets where there's no tree canopy or where there's no buffer between sidewalks and the roadway, and where we could be improving those conditions as well. And in many cases, where the road conditions themselves are in terrible condition. And so we would be reducing our long-term maintenance costs if we reduce the overall road size. There are lots of ways we could be benefiting from DPW taking on the task of shrinking down our street size, but for 8 years on the council of my advocacy on this, it hasn't happened one place once anywhere. And I'm getting tired of us not doing this thing that would be so beneficial.
Looking at it from cost efficiency for us, from an MS4 perspective, stream restorations is much, much cheaper than trying to change the geometrics of a street, a full depth reconstruction of a street. And using the utility funds into road work alone, it's probably not the right use of utility money, unless, in this case, is stream, it helped with the MS4.
I mean, I've been arguing that this would help. I mean, it would clearly help with MS4. We know that it would help us. We can get MS4 credits for it.
I agree, but the cost of doing it, the cost of doing one block of city street, a full depth reconstruction, is far exceed the cost of doing maybe, I can't give you, but I can give you that number.
I understand the ROI in terms of expense to MS4 credits.
That's right.
I want to say that I think that the department and the city has sent the message to the public in the past year or so that, no, this is not why we're doing these stream restoration projects, when I think what I'm clearly hearing is we are doing stream restoration projects because of the ROI.
No, I mean, stream restorations is done to protect our utilities to a main degree, but at the same time, it helps us in the getting the credit as well.
At some point, our streets do need to be shrunk down. And we can either allow DOT to fully shoulder that burden, or we can have DPW as a partner in this. I am of the sense that we have made zero headway in years and years and years of my advocacy at this point. We have made zero headway in bringing DPW in to be a partner to any degree in getting DOT to shrink down our roadways, to make them safer and make them more livable. Should I anticipate we're going to make any progress on this in the coming year? That's for the city administrator.
Thank you for that question, sir. So on stream restoration in particular, we'll start there. What I committed to doing is actually convening a work group around studying the impact and effects of stream restoration. What I will commit to is expanding that. So the scope isn't just about stream restoration in particular, but expanding that to look at overall just the MS4 program and how strategies for us to receive MS4 credits. So I will commit that the working group that initially was going to be formed to look at stream restoration will expand and look broadly at strategies for the city to diversify how we get our stream restoration credits. In that, I cannot commit to implementing your recommendation, but what I will commit is to bring forth that recommendation to the working group.
Maybe I'm not being clear about this, because we know that there is an extent to which DPW can contribute and for it to make money, it make financial sense. We already know that. It's not a matter of whether or not it can be done in a way that benefits DPW, right? DPW, I mean, I've seen the analysis on at least one project where we say, look, given the amount of MS4 credit we would get for a project of this sort, this is how many dollars we can justify putting towards it. That's not the issue. Whether or not we could be doing it and how that works isn't really the issue. It's, are we willing to get DOT and DPW coordinated with one another to make anything at all happen, to advance any discussion, any project life at all? I think that's a different question.
Yeah. Druid Hill Park, you're talking about cooperation between DOT and DPW. So DOT is looking to have some work done for Druid Hill Parks, and they came to us, and we will have sharing costs for that project 50-50 at this point for the work that needs to be done on Druid Hill Park.
But specifically, like for a project for which DPW is going to get MS4 credit. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when DPW could be spending money to contribute toward the total of a project for which DPW would receive some MS4 credit.
We'll take a look at the analysis and see in terms of, as far as we do, look at our cost analysis, and we'll see what we can come up with, and we'll share it with you and the council.
What I will offer, council member, is that we couldn't have a better person to lead this effort than Director Zaid, who is also a former DOT director.
I appreciate that. We've looked at one analysis on one project. I've asked for follow-up on that one project. It didn't happen. I asked for follow-up on that project repeatedly. The follow-up didn't happen. And, you know.
Can you send the director and I that project, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director, each of our mechanical street sweeping vehicles have GPS installed in them, correct?
Yes.
Are we able to view from a centralized location whether or not a route was completed or not?
We should be able to, yep. Yep.
And if a route is not going to be completed, let me take a step back. If we were going to get 6 inches of snow tomorrow, we knew that was happening, we would proactively cancel mechanical street sweeping for tomorrow, right? But let's say just turns out tomorrow that like 5 of the drivers don't show up because there was a COVID outbreak, right? And they don't come into work. So routes are going to be canceled, which was not something that we could have foreseen, correct? Or does that scenario make sense? Like routes get canceled, right? From time to time for unplanned reasons?
Well, you could, in the sense of a business answer, yes, that does happen. But the quadrant sweeping, if we have truck issues or people issues, I believe the correct route that we take is if it's a non-posted route, then that route will get rescheduled. But if it's posted, we would send that email out and say, hey, we're not going to, sweep this area. But we haven't gotten an email, I'm pretty sure this year, that we canceled a posted route.
I guess the question is, for the routes that are posted, there are parking restrictions on the signs. Where I'm getting at is if a resident receives a parking citation, but street sweeping does not occur during the posted times on the sign, a reasonable conclusion is that the resident should not have to pay the parking citation, right? Because let me just connect it. The street is signed, right? And it says you can't park from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Tuesday. And the reason you can't park is because the city is supposed to perform a service during that time. So if the city does not perform the service, a reasonable person could conclude that a parking citation issued is unfair.
Thank you for that question. We've spent hours on this in CleanStat. I think a part of the challenge is that the reason the sweeping might not have occurred is because vehicles are parked during posted hours. Therefore, sweeping cannot occur because vehicles have violated the posted time.
And to piggyback on that, we do work with DOT to ensure that they know when the routes are canceled as well.
And I'll just add, as a part of getting to compliance, we would need to ticket so that hopefully in the future, there will be compliance with the parking restrictions so that we can successfully go in and sweep. But just given the size of our sweeper vehicles, if there are multiple parked cars, we're not able to sweep in that area. So again, it's important that we still move forward with enforcement in order to start to garner more compliance, so people will start to move their vehicles so we can actually get the service done.
Okay, that's a reasonable response. But let's say in that scenario that there's vehicles parked and they are issued citations are we able to prove that the street sweeper did in fact come down the street? What happens if there's four cars on a block face and DOT comes out and issues citations because there's signage posted and the street doesn't get swept? If the street sweeper never comes down the street, then the service wasn't even attempted to be provided, correct?
Sure, I'm the sweeper expert. I've actually looked extensively into this. So yes, I hear you. There is coordination between DOT and DPW. And so there may not be an attempt to sweep if we know that there are vehicles that are currently blocking the roadway so that the sweeper can't actually make it down the street. But I understand what you're saying about there at least being an attempt to provide the service if there is enforcement of a violation that occurs.
Yeah. So I'll add to that a little bit. It shows just the intent at this point, the intent for the city to provide the service. The only reason why that service is not provided, it probably would be the vehicle is not operating or something is wrong with mechanical with the issue with the vehicle. Two things. One thing, we could look into the GPS and we'll find out whether the vehicle ran that route or not. Second thing, if you have 2 to 3 vehicles, the turn radius of a vehicle, if you have just 2 vehicles on a block, that could, and separated, let's say, by 50 to 75 feet, that will block, the whole block can be swept, or nothing of the block, because of the turn radius of the vehicle coming in, being able to sweep and coming back and do it again. So it is from a engineering perspective, from a driving perspective, those drivers can't do that, can't be able to perform for that specific block.
So based on that, there wouldn't be blocks that are posted that cannot support the turn radius of the mechanical street sweeper then, correct?
That is correct, yes. But assuming under the assumption that is, there are no vehicles at that point. So the assumption for the vehicle that comes in, it'll be coming in and no vehicle to block the sweepers at that point.
I'm going to believe what you said. I also find it very difficult to believe that there is any type of meaningful coordination between DOT parking enforcement and these fine folks here after the 3.5-hour conversation I sat through on Friday that you were present for, the DOT parking enforcement. I would be shocked and blown away if DOT parking enforcement was communicating with these folks and was like up to speed and was deploying real time appropriately based on the fact that one of Chief Jeter's, am I saying it right, like Derek Jeter? Yes, sir. That Chief Jeter's folks, when they inform DOT that there's like any type of real-time coordination there, I just,
So,
okay.
we
No,
do,
I'm done.
We do. I know Chief Carter and her superintendent. I know they talk daily to DOT. The former chief of mechanical street sweeping, she came from DOT, and I believe she helped them form, the communication, and I think they have a good rapport, and I know they talk every day. So if they don't talk, they share emails about where they're sweeping. I mean, just there is some significant communication between the two departments.
And I've been to 3 clean stats already, and in each one of those clean stats that we had, the issue was brought up, discussed from both sides, about the coordination and the needed for coordination. And there is some coordination, as far as I know. Yolanda's here? Yolanda, yes, no, Yolanda. Kesan, Chief Kesan. She stepped out. So, but Chief Kesan was,
You would know Chief Kason if you
Yeah.
saw her.
yeah. Chief Kesan was the chief
At parking enforcement.
at parking,
Yeah,
yes.
sure.
And she was the lead person over there for transportation at the time that I was there. And she was a great one at dealing with it and on top of it. And she has a good communication with all the people in DOT on that matter, beyond just the communications at the leadership level or the communication that happens also at the stat level.
Okay. One last question here. If I gave you a neighborhood, let's say Bolton Hill or Towns at the Terraces, any neighborhood that's posted for mechanical street sweeping, could you give me would DPW be able to provide a report of the GPS route for that neighborhood for the last month? Or can you do that for me I'm just going to pick Bolton Hill as an example. I'm just curious what one of those reports looks like. So let's just say for the entire month of May for Bolton Hill. Is that something you think you could get by the end of the week? Okay. Thank you very much. Conway? That's a request. Richard, you got that? For the month of May, 2024. Thank you. Conway?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Sion, you've been awesome. And so, just want to give you a shout out because I'm coming to ask you some questions and you probably already know exactly the questions I'm coming to you with. Lead pipe testing. We talked a little bit about this during the confirmation hearing for the director, and I'm curious to date. Actually, I'll start with a pre-question that'll then lead to the next question. So, how many lead connections? Excuse me. How many connections do we have to homes across the city? I guess how many households do we estimate we have?
As of now, we have roughly 177,000 that we do not know what the pipe material is.
177 that we don't know. How many total?
180,000.
180,000. So we've done about 10,000.
About
Excuse me,
4,000. About
3,000.
4,000. 4,000.
All right, about 4,000. We clearly have a long way to go.
Yes.
I won't belabor everybody with the importance of this effort. Have we considered any incentives or anything like that to encourage folks to comply, to send in information? What are actually better? Tell me what we're doing so far.
So since the beginning of the year, we have been doing public outreach, or attending public outreach meetings with various associations, both in person and virtual. Obviously, we have the self-survey. We're now pivoting, and we're focusing on specific areas and looking at, we actually have a contract going in front of the Board of Estimates on Wednesday. That's for doing inspections of service lines in situ. So just take out the meter, put a piece of equipment in, and identify what the pipe material is.
Oh, from the meter.
Yes. So
Great.
that's a big one for us. It's new technology. We're actually going to be doing some research work with EPA on that. It is a proven technology, but they want some more data. So we're going in that direction.
Great.
The con of that is it is
It costs
expensive.
money.
It's roughly $600 to $700 per inspection.
$6,700 per inspection?
$600 to $700.
$600 to $700, okay. That's good to note. This will be actually pretty helpful. Of course, we still want people to test their own lines, and we'll get into that when we have a hearing about it. But one of the things we'll have to consider is how we deal with vacant homes and abandoned homes that we can't necessarily get into, and that might be our solution for some of those.
That's our plan.
Yeah, excellent. Do we provide any incentives for folks?
We do not provide incentives. We're looking at other methods of outreach to the population. So we're looking at trying to finalize a door knocking program in person, and then provide some digital advertisements to focused areas within the city to try and promote the self-survey.
And then last question on this issue, by way of the materials that we're sharing with folks, do we have like clear photos and easily communicable ways to let people know where to look for their lead connection? Excuse me, not their lead connection, because it may not be lead, but their water line connection to the main. For a lot of folks, they may not necessarily understand even what that may be. And so I think clarity in that regard is going to help a lot.
We do have videos and photographs, samples on our website. To your point, maybe there are other better ways that we can explain that or educate the people on that.
Yeah, and then the same also goes for the difference between copper,
Yes.
lead, and galvanized pipe.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we'll talk a lot about this later on, and I understand we're going to do a briefing at some point to talk about what the plan is going forward.
Thank you.
And then I'm curious, how are things going with our wastewater treatment plants? I know we had some trouble about a year ago. A lot of that had to do with staffing. Sounds like we did a lot of hiring lately. Can you give me some insight on how things are going at our wastewater treatment plants?
I'm actually going to start it in front of our acting bureau head, just because I just want to give proper kudos and attention to the work that he's been leading. Mike Hallman, who's our chief of wastewater facilities, the entire leadership team over in the Bureau of Water and Wastewater. That team just has done a tremendous job of managing both plants over the past 2 years. As I had mentioned during the presentation, if you look at calendar year, because that's how we gauge performance for the plants, if you look at calendar year 2023, by far the best performance of Back River and Patapsco in the city's history. And that's a huge credit to Mr. Sayan, to Mr. Hallman, to all of the leadership team over there in the Bureau. And all of us just really in DPW making it a top priority for us. Going back to the former director, Dr. Mitchell, and to now, just making that a continued focus of our regular cadence of compliance calls where we talk with the staff. We resolve and troubleshoot any issues that they may be experiencing. But I'll turn it over to Acting Bureau Head Sayan to kind of elaborate more on that. But I just wanted to give that team proper kudos to their hard work and dedication.
Maybe just to tack on to what Mr. Miller had mentioned, that so as far as the staffing goes, I believe that the most important operations at the plant, our asset at the plant, are our people. So you can put in all the brand new equipment you want, you can put whatever switches you want, but if you don't have people there to operate, to maintain that equipment, it'll quickly fail. So again, our focus is on the staff. So I'll focus in on the one program that we have, the Be More Wise program, where we bring in people from externally from outside the department, have them go through an apprentice program. They come out of it as an apprentice, usually it's 6 months. That program has been so popular, we've made tweaks to it each time we've gone through a class. So we just finished our 3rd class. But since the very beginning, we've made tweaks. That program has been so popular that it's now been expanded to include our internal staff. When we first started the program, it was meant for external people coming into the department. Frankly, our staff were jealous and resentful, so we had them they were part of the 2nd class, and they just wrapped up earlier this year. Our 3rd class, which was external candidates, they just finished last week, I believe, and they're going in for taking their certification test. So hopefully for us, it's a way for us to bring in, not only bring in new talent, but also to provide that training that is so necessary for our own staff who've, quite frankly, we haven't paid as much attention as we should for the last few years.
Yeah, no, it's really, really good to hear. And I know we were in a pretty sticky spot a little over a year ago, and I'm glad to hear that things seem to be on a better foot. I'm curious, are there any major lessons learned on, with regard to monitoring, monitoring staff, or anything that can help us to take advantage of early warning signs for these kinds of issues, should they ever happen again?
Yeah, I think, frankly, because of the lack of training that we've had over the years, that training has also meant a lack of training for our supervisors, our managers. So getting them up to speed on how should you be, how responsible you should be to your own staff. How do you manage staff? How do you manage a contract? The finances of running our business. Frankly, our staff are still having a hard time. We need to run more as a business, more efficiently. So that is a learning process in itself. Certainly, the training part of it and the certification part of it, understanding that there are requirements, certification requirements that are required to be on the plant. We're adding that into our positions now, so as to make it a requirement in order to move up in the organization.
Yeah, we had HR in earlier this morning, and we were talking about some of the apprenticeship programs that exist to help young people not coming out of college and also out of university. I think those are great opportunities, but it also sounds like there's maybe some training that needs to happen internally as folks, move into management roles and don't necessarily know how to manage yet, or move into higher level supervisory roles that have a different skill set that we've always got to be cognizant of how we can mentor and train folks to do those jobs effectively. So really good to hear.
I'd like to add one thing, if you don't mind.
Please.
Michael Hellman and Paul have done a wonderful job in something that I think throughout the city, and first throughout DPW and then maybe throughout the city will do. Start looking at every job that they have, and whether the job that is the specs written for that job 20 years ago, do you need that job as is? You just don't hire the same people. So they're looking at each one of those jobs and what is needed right now in order to get the right person for it, the right set of skills. And that's something kind of, we need to think it through the whole department, probably throughout the city. But that's, again, credit to Paul and Mike Hellman on that one.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. If I can go back to the question about the lead connections, you mentioned we were paying $600 to $700 per inspection for the check at the meter.
600 to 700.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the contract that we're looking into, do we have an estimate of how many units we might have them check?
So the contract is for 10,000 inspections. Half of that is for Baltimore County. So 5,000.
Got
We're
it.
going to see how the process works. The technology is proven, but we still want to start small. And then if we need to expand, we can certainly expand that program.
I see. Okay. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Also been joined by Chris Burnett, Councilman from the 8th District. Burnett? Burnett, do you have introduction and then now questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my first question, so I wanted to go back to a question that Councilmember Porter asked regarding the SOS programs and the expedited reimbursement programs. Can you provide us a breakdown of how many households were helped through each program in the last fiscal year as a request for the committee, Mr. Chair?
I have it for you right
Oh, you
now.
have
Do you want to, earlier I provided stats for fiscal year 23 and 24, so
That's
I could do the
perfect.
same
Sorry, I
thing right
wasn't
now.
here. My apologies.
Okay, so I'll start off first with the reimbursement program. I mentioned earlier, fiscal year 23, there was $0 amount paid out to date. There was 27 applications received and 0 applications approved. Same program in fiscal year 24, $14,842.12 that has been paid out to date. We've had a total number of 33 applications and 3 of those were approved. For the SOS program, fiscal year 23, it was $77,359.61 that was paid for cleanups, and that went to 11 homeowners and properties. In fiscal year 24, It's $43,704.59, and that has gone out to 4 property and homeowners.
So can you, I guess, elaborate on, I mean, there's a $2 million allocation for that program, and what we've seen year over year is a very small number of households approved for this initiative. But for me, it's just hard to grasp given we've had thousands of backups every year. I mean, it's even been an issue on my own block. Turns out it was on my side of the line the last time. But I do know that for my neighbors and people across the city that this remains an issue. Can we speak to why there is so few folks applying relative to the number of backups and obviously very little paid out of this program, given we know that the scale of the problem is sort of not reflective of that?
Yeah, I could start there. So as we mentioned, we designate $2 million each year out of the utility budget specifically for the programs. As the programs are currently designed to fit the requirements of the modified consent decree. So the modified consent decree has a very specific definition for what is a qualified event. It has to be capacity related, it has to be a wet weather event, and there's strict criteria for anybody experiencing a backup or a building backup to be able to apply and be eligible to receive that type of funding. So that's why you do see the numbers in terms of the lower number that qualify, which then in turns to be the lower number of dollars that have been paid out through the program. So I should note that we have been negotiating with the EPA and MDE in terms of phase 2 plan for the modified consent decree, which also includes any modifications to the basement backup, building backup programs. All of that has still been under negotiations. It's really with MDE right now, but we have been in active negotiations for any modifications to that program. As soon as that negotiation has been finalized, then we'll be happy to report that out to the City Council and to the public.
Can I ask one more follow-up, Mr. Chair, on this? So it's my understanding, though, that despite the EPA and MDE's position has been that the agency should include both wet and dry backups, that the agency has pushed back, appealed, I don't know if that's the right word, to describe the current situation. Can you explain why?
Yeah. So back on May 22nd, 23, the EPA had sent us a letter with the support of MDE for the city to require the city to expand the basement backup program to cover all basement backups originating at least partially in the main line, whether capacity related or not, and whether they occurred during wet or dry weather. So essentially full-on scope expansion of the program. So the city did not agree with the position for a number of reasons. Chief among those reasons was the scope of the required expansion was not equitable for cities, for Baltimore residents. So under the expanded program as written, only a small percentage of the backups originating in the main line would be eligible for cleanup. So essentially, those properties that are eligible, especially at the beginning of the year, would then qualify if you're experiencing a backup towards the end of the year and the program is exhausted its funding. There's no way to make that person eligible for those costs. Otherwise, you're expanding the total amount that's designated for the program, which based off of the data would be very cost prohibitive to the utility. So due to these concerns, the city invoked the dispute resolution procedures that's allowed under the modified consent decree. And the city wanted to work with the EPA and MDA to come up with a program that can ensure that any expansion would treat similarly situated citizens and residents the same, so that all qualifying backups could be within the program budget. So like I mentioned, we're still in those negotiations with the EPA and MDE on what that type of program is going to be finalized as. But it's been our intent since the beginning is if we're going to expand the program that there's an equal distribution, equitable distribution to anybody that's qualifying under that program.
So it's the cost, if I could simplify that
Yes.
we are not
Yes.
reimbursing folks or don't want to expand it because there'd just be too many people dealing with this problem?
So I think they did a study in 2021 in which the estimated, in terms of a number, roughly $14 million to include the dry condition into the study itself. So if you add $14 million in 2021, I can guarantee it is probably 20 million now in today's 18 to 20 million dollars in today's cost. So you're looking at that number right now. So in case someone has, the $2 million will be exhausted in the first probably few months of it, and the rest of the year you're not going to have anybody who's getting anything. So that's where the equity is going to be lost in the process. So I give you an example. If you have someone who's capable but applied early and was able to get it in January and February, and then someone who is not able to afford it, but his incident didn't happen until October or September, all that money will be exhausted and wouldn't be able to be carried out during that period.
And has the agency tried to figure out other sources of funding to expand the program? Because I think if we can sort of recognize that there's a problem that carries a price tag of $14 million, we're barely, at this point, I think you said 14,000 or so was spent last year, so we're not even hitting the 2 million as it currently stands. So there's got to be, in my perspective here, and for a lot of folks that experience this in my district, are concerned that if we're not, essentially we're saying we can't help you because we don't have enough revenue dedicated to it to address the full scale of the problem.
I'll say something and then I'll let
That's sort of how I'm receiving it, if I'm receiving it wrong.
So I think that's part of the negotiations right now that we're having with MDE. How can we get it up to the $2 million, exhaust the $2 million somehow, some way, with a process in place that will be equitable at the same time. So it's part of the negotiations that we have with MD, and I think we're optimistic about it.
Yeah, definitely optimistic and definitely want to maximize the $2 million allocation that we budget each year, like the director had mentioned. The other thing to note is just the overall improvements that we continuously make to the sewer system each year, the improvements we make at both plants, the interceptor line that's going into the back river, the preventative maintenance work that we're doing on all of our sewer lines, all of those things in totality over the years, we would see the number of SSOs, both in volume and percentages, reduce. We've looked at those numbers. We presented that information out when we did our annual report earlier in January. You look at the total number of SSOs, by volume and percentages, all have decreased over the previous 3 years. A huge credit to that is the Headworks facility over at Back River. And as we continuously make improvements to both Back River and Patapsco plants, you would also see that trend continuously going down.
So I guess the thing I didn't really get was what are you planning to implement to even hit the $2 million mark? To expend what we've been allocating for the last several years. We've never, since I've been on this council, ever hit that number or come close to it, frankly.
Somewhere in between the two requirements, the full dry, whether somehow, some way, and I say that without getting into the details because of the negotiations still ongoing with MDE, but we think we're pretty close to be able at least to get a number that would we hit at least the $2 million within and be equitable at the same time, based on the calculation, based on some of the numbers that we got.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, I had we have significant vacants in District 10. One of the major issues that we're running into with boarding vacant properties is the materials that we are using to board vacant properties. Can you speak to how you all are evaluating kind of the work hours for repeatedly, like just boarding up the same vacant properties, and whether you all are looking at additional materials such as plexiglass? I know you all are using longer type of nails, but it doesn't seem to be addressing the issue of persons experiencing homelessness, kind of breaking into those properties and staying in those properties.
So I'll start and I'll allow the director and team to weigh in. So this is also a topic that we've been spending a significant amount of time on in CleanStat, where we have been just coordinating between agencies. We have started to look at other different types of material. I believe we looked at Detroit and a couple of other places. So there are a couple of pretty significant challenges with the types of materials, with diversifying the types of materials we use. One of the challenges is with the fire department being able to respond and being able to get access to a space very quickly. And so, which is why we would want to coordinate directly with the fire department before implementing or upgrading any types of materials that we would use for these vacant properties. But we have, again, I've been having the OPI team work with DHCD and DPW to do research to see what other jurisdictions are using as far as their materials and what materials we might be able to pilot here in the city of Baltimore. And then, of course, coordinating with fire so that they can respond appropriately and not have any issues gaining access because of the types of materials that we're using.
Sure, and I bring that up because I believe it's Kansas City that actually uses the plexiglass material. So it's one of the major issues that, when speaking with Chief Wallace, is that the fire officers or the firefighters can't get into the house quickly, or they can't get out quickly. And so there are shatterproof plexiglasses that could be used. I'm wondering if we could escalate that, given that we have such a high propensity of vacant properties across the city, where we're noticing that persons experiencing homelessness are staying in the properties, and we have no way of verifying whether they are in the properties or not unless someone kind of reaches out to us. You know what I'm saying? So it's no proactive quality assurance of making sure that the properties are staying boarded, that there are people not living in there, they're not damaging or putting safety risks to the other neighbors that are living around them.
Thank you.
Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to go back to the SOS program again. My understanding of how it's structured in the consent decree that we're in is that when the resident calls 311 to say, hey, I've had a basement backup, they are supposed to be offered by the 311 agent the basement backup service. And that seems to not be occurring if the numbers are so low. Am I correct on how that's supposed to be done?
Yeah, I believe it is. I believe it is offered. I would say that the reasons why the numbers are low, it's a good thing. We don't have a lot of wet weather basement backups due to undersized pipe. So a lot of the basement backups that happen during wet weather don't qualify for that reason.
Oh, you're saying that the definition of a basement backup is so narrowly focused in that's why the numbers are so low.
Because we don't have small pipe, which is causing the backups to occur. That's
right, it's
why
other factors that are causing that to occur.
It is.
Like a broken pipe or, something, or
It is, but
clog.
according to the modified consent decree, that's the definition that was used in order for this program.
Okay.
And Councilwoman, I'll double check. I remember when I started here almost 2 years ago, we had just worked out that process with 311 and provided them that information. So I'll double check and make sure that we've submitted everything to that office and are coordinating correctly with them so that they're making that known to the customer or to the residents when they're calling in. So we'll follow up with them.
Thank you. And I'm glad that this is all being brought up again in terms of a phase 2. I think your office has been called by me and my office several times and has many, once there is a sewage backup and we identify that it's a city, it's taken care of immediately in terms of we have to dig, we have to replace it, or we have to clear the line. So I do want to acknowledge that your shop has been very helpful with all of the backups in the last couple of years that we've seen in my office. The basements weren't cleaned, but the issue with the pipe was immediately taken care of, and I do very much appreciate that. So thank you. for that. Just please keep us posted on the negotiations as to how that's going, because frankly, when my constituents call, and I think my colleagues would agree that, you know, if it's a dry weather event, it's just bizarre. Like, why would this be happening if it was a dry weather event, and then they're, you know, having to live with the, you know, it needs to be addressed, and we need to be able to provide the service. I get that it's going to be expensive, but until we are able to, you know, clear out all of our pipes, it's going to keep happening. And so I think that our residents deserve to be able to have the service, and that's why the EPA is getting involved. I will also say that this is the second time that we've heard this argument that we're going to run out of money, so it's not equitable, so we're not going to do it. And not necessarily from DPW, but from other departments. And so I think we need to be careful about how we're using equity, because equity is really about making sure that the areas that continue to get ignored in Baltimore City do not get ignored anymore. And so that means that what we would have to do is actually focus this program in those areas, not that we're going to run out of money and so it's not equitable. I think we just need to be clear about that. If we're going to run out of money, we're going to run out of money. And that's just something that we need to think about, you know, citywide. My second question is going into the vacant property piece. My understanding of that service 662, is not just about vacant properties. We mow the lawns and we board when somebody is saying, hey, we need to mow the lawn. This happens a lot because frankly, we have a lot of properties that are empty but not designated with a VPN. And so the lawn needs to be mowed. And so I was wondering about a couple of things. Are we, and maybe this is something for OPI, since you're doing the vacancy, what did you call it, detection work relative to the water shutoffs, whether to look at the data around, and you can use my district as an example, the calls for mowing of, you know, high grass and weeds in a property that's not a VPN, because that is likely to be a VPN at some point in time. So because we do have a lot of properties that are just empty. They're not VPNs, because remember, the threshold for VPN is that it's uninhabitable, which I would argue we need to change, because we can't take action on those properties that continually have high grass and weeds if they're not designated vacant, or the neighbors mow the lawn because they don't want it to look bad. We just have a lot more empty properties that nobody's living in than are what designated as VPN. And the only way we can take action on those properties is if it's designated as a VPN in terms of a vacant building notice, right? So I would just say that if you're doing the vacancy detection relative to water and looking at high consumption of water and saying, oh yeah, that's definitely a vacant property, let's put a VPN on it, that you also look at the high grass and weeds data that might give us more of that. And we discussed this before about how do we make sure that we're actually looking at what's vacant and what's not, and then be able to take action on that. Because we, at least in my district, we have all kinds of complaints about high grass and weeds, but these are properties that do not have designated VPN, but they are clearly empty and nobody's in them. But I do want to take action on them in order to make sure that they don't become a nuisance, you know, in the community. Is that something that OPI might be interested in looking at?
Yeah, yes, thank you for that. Your comments just sparked a couple of ideas for me. I just have to, before I can commit to it, I have to work with the team to make sure that we can do it. But I do think that there is an opportunity for us to kind of expand like our vacancy dashboard, or at least even our internal dashboard, by like whether it's pulling the 311 requests that are coming in, being able to do a data bump with like the 311 requests that are coming in for high grass and weeds versus the VBNs. So I think there are a couple of different things that we could do that might get at what you are looking for, but I will work with OPI to see what their thoughts are and how we might be able to track this information.
Yeah, when I encourage my constituents that when they're calling about high grass and weeds to actually put in a vacant building inspection instead, okay? Because then when you get the vacant building inspection, you get all of it plus the work order for the high grass and weeds, right? So we're asking the inspectors to look at all of it to try to put a VBN on this property, because we cannot do anything legally on the property until it's got a VBN on it.
Yep, and then, again, I'll work with the team, because right now, as a part of our sprints, we're doing high grass and weeds at vacant lots and vacant properties. I will double check to see if we are only doing VBNs, but I think we're doing all
I'm
that
really
come
sure you're
in.
doing all of them. So, yeah,
Yeah,
just
well,
depending on what the 311s are.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to get at, is that they're generally coming in through 311. So that would likely be a mix, but we can start there and just do the data bump on the 2,500 that we're doing as a part of the sprints to see how many of those actually have a VBN. And then what we could do is, if they don't have a VBN, then we could send those to start the VBN inspection process, which I don't think we're currently doing, but this exchange made me think that we should do it, that there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, I just think that we just need to find the best ways to capture, again, I have several in my district that I can send you, that we want to take action on the property, but we cannot without the VBN, right? So hoping to utilize that, maybe even graffiti, right? If somebody's calling about graffiti all the time in a property, that, that's likely, VBN material, as well. So just since you're doing the vacancy detection relative to water, I was just thinking we could expand that a little bit, because I think it would make a lot of sense to utilize more data relative to what qualifies as a VPN. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple more, but I'll wait till the next round. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one last question, and I guess just listening to all of my colleagues, DPW does you have so many contracts, so many capital improvement projects, so many clean initiatives that really it's a long list, the longest list that I've seen in just about any other agency. Have you considered having a separate quality assurance office that can just be responsible for that quality assurance for all of those, every single project that you do? I think it would just kind of hone in and would just be one of the pieces that would just really help you strategize and just kind of bring everything together. It would help with the communication piece, that because you do so much, could you respond? Would that be something that you would be interested in trying to bring together? Because there are some cities that I'm sure have, these types of offices within their agencies.
It's definitely something that we could look at and see the feasibility of it. The only thing that it probably of not concerned, but to think about for a little bit, is the fact that we do so many different things.
And you have so many mandates from the federal government, and it just seems like your own quality assurance office would really help you with all of that.
Yeah.
You have projects, you have communities that, the Stony Run and those projects, flooding issues, and just deal with so many capital improvement projects. You're presently now, going in different communities, doing all the infrastructure. Having an office that would just make sure that all of those problems, you have someone that's looking and following everything directly, I think would be a wonderful thing to try to have and consider. It doesn't have, it would be a small taking of, and that would be their responsibility.
Great, thank you. Yep.
Thank you, that's it for me.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a sort of funny question. I'm curious, if you had to guess, how many times do you think you'd see zero waste in the budget? Somebody guess, humor me, please.
Zero. Zero.
Oh, you're wrong. It's actually in the budget
One?
twice.
Oh.
And you know where it is? It's under forestry
I was gonna say
for Camp
planning.
Small. And this goes back to a question I think Councilman Dorsey brought up earlier. You know, being all on the same page about what our goal is here. I think it's a real opportunity for us, no matter how difficult the goal is, to be direct, to be clear. We are shooting for a zero. When NASA set out to get to the moon, they weren't trying to get 76% of the way there. They wanted to get all the way there. And to get the innovations that we want to see, to make the progress we want to see, we have to shoot for the moon. So just thinking about that piece here, I know it's tough. I know it's going to take a lot of creativity, and maybe we don't have all the answers today. But if we want to make that progress, we have to shoot for zero. One of the things I noticed was that under waste reuse and disposal, our target for recycling is only 20%. Why is that?
I'll take that one again. Thank you, Councilman Conway, for the question. So we noted in the presentation that that percentage is actually staying stagnant. And then if you go to the performance measure for the previous section for waste removal and recycling, the actual tonnage number for recycling collected is target for fiscal year 24 is 30,000. Our target for fiscal year 25 is 23,000. So it's actually lower next year than it is in our current year. The 23,000 number that you see for the target for 25, that's actually a more realistic picture based off of what we've been collecting so far and on our trend. I mentioned during the presentation a couple times, we expect that number to increase over time. We expect the total percentage to increase over time. And that's really just going to be continued outreach with our staff and making sure people are fully aware of the recycling program. And then just all of our increased communications or increased expansion efforts on our waste diversion office. It's a total team effort to making sure that we're getting those numbers up to where they should be.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed was that there was a $3.8 million increase in the budget. I'm curious what that's going toward and whether we think it'll help us significantly increase those efforts in progress toward that target.
What was the number you cited again?
3.8 million.
For which service area
This
again?
is 664.
Councilman, the increase for the services budget is broken out on page 288. You can see sort of what all of the increases that make up the higher general fund allocation. The bulk of these are current level of service adjustments for things like staff. This is also where we have the additional tipping fees, and we've also continued to increase the allocation that we plan for in the operating budget for the landfill closure and development costs.
Yeah. That helps to understand a little bit of it, part of the story. I think the question that I'm trying to get to here is, what do we understand about why we're not hitting those recycling targets? And I mean, I think we should probably be more aggressive on recycling targets. And what does it take for us to get to 50% or more? You know, is it education? Is it our systems? What is it? And how do we make sure that this budget reflects an understanding about what that gap is? And where do we put the funding to make sure that we can close that gap is essentially what I'm thinking of here.
Yeah, so definitely on the education front, for our current fiscal year 24, you know, as we got into this current budget cycle, knowing that at some point in the fiscal year in Q1 of 24, that we were going to be going back to weekly recycling, all of our outreach dollars that were general funded all went towards this weekly recycling campaign. And it hasn't stopped just because we started weekly recycling back in March. The team's actually working on additional materials. My understanding is they're actually working on a newer video that they're going to be filming here in the next month. But we're not going to stop just in this fiscal year. Same thing for next year. all of those outreach dollars that we designate, a lot of it is going to be going towards recycling, because we want to make sure that we're just maximizing our recycling program to its fullest. Not only does it help out the environment, but that also prolongs the life of the landfill. We want to make sure that we're, whatever waste we're sending to the landfill is as minimal as possible, and that's really going to, we really need everybody's help to ensure that we're maximizing everything that's going into the blue cart. We have the staff requirements now. We have the available trucks. We're able to go and pick it up. So we just want to make sure that the public is fully aware that what materials go into the blue cart, and then we keep pushing that same messaging, and then we just continuously up our outreach efforts each year.
Yeah, and I had an opportunity maybe 2 years ago now to go, it's been a while, to go out to see a MRF. I forget which one it was. I want to say in Prince George's County, with the DPW team, and just to understand what it might look like to have the ability to auto sort a lot of those efforts. And once again, thinking outside of the box of what we can do to increase those recycling numbers, improve, or rather reduce what ends up going to the incinerator is always going to be a good thing for us. And making those investments now will give us much more time for those investments to pay off over time.
Yep, the DPW team, and I was invited, but unfortunately I was not able to make it, but we did do a tour of that facility maybe about a year ago to just kind of see how they were managing their work, and to look for opportunities to expand or replicate some of that work here in the city of Baltimore. So we're really familiar with the facility, and we've met with the leadership in Prince George's County.
Yeah, and forgive me, I can't remember what the MRF stands for. Someone help me out here. But we went there, and I didn't realize that MRF had been around since the 90s. And it was incredibly clean. You would not think that a waste facility would be as clean as it was. So, it gives me a strong sense of what can be, for what I would say is an old facility, built in the 90s. It looked relatively new. And what they were doing there, I think, was really, 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 really cool. So
Councilman, let me just help you out with a little information. So Murphy's material recovery facility, that is going to be officially probably retired by 2025. And I believe they're going to call it, I think it's Recycling Center. There's 3 symbols that I'm hearing they're changing it, because a lot of facilities are called a dirty MRF, and they're trying to get away from that in our industry. And I just wanted to add to what CA was saying about the education piece, and you had asked about how can we get those numbers up and numbers down. So engagement is going to be key. We are currently working on, the comms team is working on a education video exclusively for the residents of Baltimore City. In this particular production, every resident will see where the recycling is coming from, where it's going to get sorted, and where it's processed at. I think if a person can get some buy-in, the people who aren't recycling, the people who are watching today who aren't recycling, if they see this this message we're working on, hopefully that will give them some inspiration to say, okay, hey, I'm taking the time to rinse out my recycling and put it out in the curb, and it's truly going to a recycling facility to be sorted and processed and put back into our economy in a positive manner. So hopefully before the summer, you'll see this out in the city on social media and whatever other market areas we can use.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, thank you for that update. The second question that I had was in 2023, in the 2023 budget, there's funding there to do a feasibility study for the implementation of zero waste initiatives and a feasibility of a solid waste enterprise fund. You guys said last year that would be out a year later. So I wanted to know where we are with that, if there are any updates on that, that study.
Can you repeat the study?
This is a study for the implementation of zero waste initiatives and a feasibility of the solid waste enterprise fund.
So I'll speak to not the study, but the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. So we actually are evaluating whether or not we can establish a Solid Waste Enterprise Fund as a part of the 10-year financial plan work. There are some unique challenges, or not even unique challenges, but the way that we currently kind of manage trash collection and the payment of trash collection is unique from other jurisdictions. And it would be a pretty significant move, I think, for our residents if we were to shift that. But that would essentially be how we would establish the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund, would be through kind of charging or separating out the current charge for trash collection. But we're evaluating whether or not we should do that as a part of the finance department's work on the 10-year plan.
I see, and that, I'm sure that will be in some way brought into the recommendations for the 10-year financial plan, but the sort of deep dive into what that might look like and how it might affect operations or anything regarding DPW as a separate study, are we still doing that?
And that's something, I just got the update from staff. It's something we have to look into. We got to look and see where those funds were correctly allocated to. So it's something, a follow-up for us to look into and provide you a response.
Okay. When is an appropriate time that you think we could hear back?
Yeah, if you could give us 2 weeks.
That's fine. Okay. That we're going to make that an official request, 2 weeks for an update. In 2 weeks for an update on the implementation of zero waste initiatives and feasibility of a solid waste enterprise fund. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, Middleton, good? Conway, Porter? Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to go back to the conversation we were having earlier about the SOS and reimbursement program. So I do have the letter from the EPA, and in here it specifically notes at several instances that the $2 million requirement would be sufficient to cover both wet and dry weather backups based on the EPA's assessment, and that the agency is instead arguing on the grounds of just not being liable or not wanting to be liable for dry weather backups, or I guess some other legal issues. But so I'm curious, and I would want the agency or this committee to be provided the agency's assessment, because you gave a number of $14 million. That's pretty significantly higher than the EPA's assessment. So I think it would be helpful for this committee to have access to your assessment and how you got to that number, if that could be included. Yes, that's a request.
Yeah.
If we could get the DPW's assessment that to expand the SOS program and expedited reimbursement programs to cover both wet weather and dry weather residential backups, that would be helpful for us because it's a lot different than what the EPA is saying.
Yeah, and Councilman, I believe we have presented that information out at past hearings, so we can reproduce that presentation or report for you all. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess if you could give us shorthand how your assessment is so far larger in cost than the EPA's assessment. Could you give us a summation of that?
Yeah, without getting too details into the EPA assessment, we'd have to go and look at whatever metrics they were looking at, but we've done, as the director noted, and the staff have noted at previous hearings, we've done our assessment, look at our data and performance, and those were the numbers we came up with. I don't know what methodology the EPA used, so I would refrain from commenting on their assessment.
Okay, thank you. The second question I had, We've gotten calls from constituents and tenants' rights organizations that there have been continued denial to renters to get access to their water bills. And in 2022, there was an ordinance passed to try and address that issue. Can you speak to why or what, how many denials have been given, if you are tracking that information, and why you would still be denying renters access to their water bills?
I haven't seen any specific data on that, but we can take a look and see if we can run a report. Yeah, we can look at our system and see what type of report we can produce in terms of residents who were tenants receiving copies of their water bills and go from there. But I don't believe I've seen that number reported out through our data and metrics. So it might take us some time to go and see how we can pull that information for you all.
How much time would you need? Because I would like to submit that as a request.
That's not even a category. Yeah, can we take a few days to give you an estimate on the time frame? Because it might be a little bit more in depth of a process as we're starting to think this out in terms of how we'd come up with that metric and number. But if there was a specific resident in any of your districts that are experiencing that issue, if they can please notify our office directly, this way we can make sure it's getting escalated and resolved in a timely manner.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Chair, how would you, I haven't been here for some of the hearings. I don't know how you want to handle, like, how much, if they can follow up with us within by like Wednesday to see how much time they would need to provide the report. Does that seem reasonable, or?
Faith, how much time?
I just want to make sure it happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you want me to confirm how much time is needed for DPW to respond back? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you could give us to the end of the week just to give you an estimate on how long that would take, like I mentioned, we got to look and see in the system of how it's captured. If it's not specifically called out, that's going to be a very lengthy process to go account by account to figure out who has access to those bills. So it just depends on how it's categorized.
So Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah, we will give you an update by Friday of what we have in our system.
Okay.
Councilman, would you be able to restate the formal request just so that we make sure we have it logged correctly?
So I want to know how many residents have that are renters that have requested access to their water bills and were denied access, how many were approved access, and if there were any, I guess, patterns or reasons that sort of emerged as to why people would still be denied access. That would be helpful for us, because we're hearing from a bunch of different advocacy groups that, you know, helped us advocate for the passage of the law, that they're getting feedback that people are still having difficulty with this. We can get you, and actually got a message from my staffer. One of my staffers was denied. And so we want to just figure out what may be creating some challenges here for people.
I just want to make it clear that we're going to get you an update by Friday.
Of how long it would take you to run the report. So it's like.
That is exactly correct.
Yeah. Yeah, not that you would have it by Friday, but when we can expect it. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm done for you.
Dorsey? Ramos?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk about Water for All program. There's many things that we brought up last year that I'm pretty sure have not changed. And I was anticipating having a hearing on this separately, and it did not occur. So I'm going to ask here. We are still, our constituents of mine are still having challenges with applying, and of course they have to apply every year or renew every year. We are still also seeing the discount only once a year, and that's challenging for our residents who are on a fixed income and want to see that discount throughout the year. And my understanding was that that's not a change that needs to be done in the legislation, but that change still has not occurred. And then, you know, we've been doing this program for a couple of years now, so wanting to see if there's adjustments that you'd like to see made. But then lastly, the statistics we heard at the beginning of the presentation were such that Water for All is not even anywhere near covering the same amount of people that BH2O did. And so I want to get a sense of why that is as well. I think it might be just the transition from BH2O to Water for All, but I just want to, I need an update basically on where we are with Water for All.
That's perfect. Thank you, Chief Mills, who just gave me one of the updates there. So there's a current working group that our Water Advocacy Office has been working with. They're looking at Water for All right now. The update I just received is that by the end of this month, they should have some recommendations if there's going to be any proposals from that group in terms of changes to the program. In respect to BH2O, the applicants or those that qualified for BH2O versus Water for All, my understanding is there was a change in some of the metrics, in some of the eligibility terms, so that could be seeing a difference. I know when I started here 2 years ago, we really made a focus to specifically target those BH2O customers, especially those that we recognized had not applied for Water for All. So very aggressive direct communications to those properties, both in mailers, and I believe we were actually doing direct phone calls for some time to those residents that were on BH2O, because we wanted to make sure that anybody who was eligible for Water for All was making sure that we were getting them their applications submitted, and then utilizing our partners at MOCFS to make sure that those applications are being processed. So like I'd mentioned, 7.3 million that's been given out for Water for All since 2012. That was 4.3 million for homeowners and 3 million for tenants. Total approved homeowners over 5,300 and 2,400 approved tenants. I think overall we've made tremendous progress, especially working out the application process with MOCFS and funding positions for that office, to making sure that they have the staff available to make those process those applications. And then for us as a utility, just making sure that we're including that information to all of our customers. One of the great things about Promise Pay, I'm going to pivot to a different program. Promise Pay does proactive outreach to our residents that are falling behind on their water bills. And so we send over a daily file to Promise Pay. They see our customer base, they have their contact information. They put out calls to those customers and saying, hey, we noticed that your water bill is past due. You know, is there any assistance that you need? They ask them a series of questions to see, you know, maybe they're eligible for Water for All, but they didn't know Water for All existed. So they're actually talking to somebody over the phone. If it's determined, or if it sounds like that person could be eligible for Water for All, then Promise Pay gets them connected directly to MOCFS, gets them connected to the application and resources so that they could apply for Water for All. And so, like I mentioned, just a number of different improvements that we're making, and then we'll be looking forward to seeing the results of the study that Chief Mills had mentioned to me previously.
Oh, thank you. What's the time frame on that working group results again? You may have not said it, I missed it.
At the end of this month.
End of this month.
They would have their recommendations ready.
And then we'll get that, or we'll have a hearing. How did you, I'll just make a formal request that we get it. Okay. And when the results come out on the working group, and who's on the working group? Is it an internal group, or do you have
Chief Mills to come up and provide that information?
And while the chief comes up, I did want to also share and acknowledge our partnership with the Department of Social Services. So they also have a low-income water assistance program as well. And I believe they did some direct outreach to us. And we do referrals, especially if we have residents that don't meet our current eligibility requirements. So there are multiple ways that we support our residents getting access to water and utility assistance.
Good afternoon, Chief R. Anthony Mills, Office of Water Advocacy and Customer Appeals. So we have a work group that meets 3 times a week where we are addressing any issues related to Water for All. Participants in this work group include myself as part of the Office of Water Advocacy, members of the MOCFS staff that administer the program, and the utility policy team from Customer Service and Support Division.
Thank you. So it's an internal group, and how are we reaching out to some of the customers who are experiencing delays in application or they can't reach somebody? There's been recent changes at MOCFS, so that it wasn't the same staff person. Are we doing that part?
Yes, ma'am. So actually, in a partnership that the department has with Civic Works and the Able Foundation, we have someone that is providing direct on-the-ground feedback from challenges customers may be receiving and suggestions for how to mitigate that. We are also looking at comparing how we can improve the process so that the application process takes into account those who do and do not have access online, so that we can process the applications quicker in accordance with what's in the city code.
Mm-hmm. So you contracted with Civic Works through a grant from the Able Foundation to do this outreach?
As a part of, so one of the other things we do, twice a week, we have a meeting with the water advocates. And so as a part of that, Able committed to providing a grant to Civic Works to assist us with the processing of those applications. And that is primarily targeted to our elder residents. And the goal was 100. They've exceeded it so far with 250. And so they're continuing that even though they've met their goal. Yes, ma'am.
And that will be included in the report that you, or whatever form
Right.
it's going to be, a memo report on, you know, what you've been doing internally, and then also how you've been outreaching to customers, as well as working with Civic Works.
We can include that. The work group, we will be meeting at the end of the month, so the report won't be available exactly at the end of the month, but I will make sure that we get that to our executive leadership team to provide to you all.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the challenges that we have in our office is, you know, people reach out to us when when nobody's answering the phone, because they're not online customers. So they're trying to get a hold of somebody to make an appointment, to go get the application, or to renew their application, and then people are not answering the phone. And then there's been some changes to MOCFS, so we're like, who do we contact, right? Because nobody's telling us who we're supposed to contact. So, and I'm sure my colleagues can give you some feedback as well. So please reach out to us as you do this, because it's an important program, and I'm grateful that you're doing that analysis.
Yep. So, Councilwoman, I'll be sure that to have MOCFS prepared to address some of your concerns. On the staff member transition, the director of the Water for All program just got a promotion. So they are still within the agency. And so if folks reach out, I'm sure that they are still available to share their information with the appropriate staff member. But I will ensure that Dr. Brooks is prepared to answer questions on Water for All tomorrow.
Thanks. I was going to add those to my questions. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. My second question is not related. It's going back to dealing with the vacant properties. So one of the things that I'm sure you're seeing in the exploration with the water shutoffs, and I'm glad that it's happening. I think that the DPW gave me the proposal that you would initially do the water for vacants only based on specific criteria and by district. And it seems like now it's based on like highest water usage and then needs to shut off because it's doing the most damage, which I totally get, that's fine. What we're seeing, what people have come to me about is, let's say that it's a private transaction where someone wants to purchase that vacant and abandoned property to be able to rehab it. And it's done in a private way where they're either working with the family or whoever owns it. Or it could have been that they bought the lien in tax sale and are about to foreclose. There's a 2-year gap, and then that water bill increases. We really need to have lien release in this particular case because these are private transactions. And so they're not going through in rem where we extinguish the liens. We do have authority to be able to do lien release in cases of redevelopment. So I'm hoping that, because a lot of the activity we're seeing relative to vacant and abandoned properties now is all private transactions for the most part. So and I think Commissioner Kennedy is aware of this because we talked a little bit about it. And my understanding from some conversations is that DPW has been resistant to do this type of thing because you want to collect, which I get. But if we can make sure that that property is actually being rehabbed and back online, then we're actually going to see, tax benefit because it's back online. So have we had any conversations with the commissioner, with others about making sure that this, with very, very strict criteria, it's not going to be for everybody, that this type of thing can occur so that the transaction can happen and we rehab that vacant property, the general we, not we, the city, can rehab that property.
I can take it. No, thank you, Councilwoman Ramos, for that. So not necessarily in-depth conversations, just preliminary conversations with DHCD. I'm happy to report that the gentleman sitting right behind me, Aaron Moore, is back with us now as our CFO. When Aaron had left and moved to out of state over a year ago, he and I had that conversation about what kind of program we could put together, and then going back and forth on some different criteria level that we wanted to engage with DHCD. I think with his expertise coming back to the agency, I think we're ready at a point to start having those discussions with them again, and then with our new director as well too, and sharing some of those ideas with him. So it's still kind of more in the preliminary stage, but I think you're absolutely correct. We want to make sure that whatever we're designating towards abating or waiving the outstanding balance on some of those vacant properties are one, not a financial detriment to the utility, but at the same time, maximizing the economic benefits in the long run, both for the city and for us, because eventually those potentially could be new customers for us that we can get on our get into our billing system. So new conversations that we're likely going to have over the next few months with DHCD, especially with the new expertise that I have sitting behind me.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, we would, through in-rem, we're extinguishing the liens anyway. Like, we're just doing that when we take it through the in-rem process. So, but not every transaction is going to be through this. So we want to just make sure that we can get these done. Narrow criteria, because we don't want to just, so I'm happy to be a part of those conversations, but I think we need to kind of do that fairly quickly. At least by the fall, have a plan for moving forward in that direction with a solid application, working with finance, et cetera, on that. Is that reasonable? Fall-ish, like October?
That sounds reasonable on my side, yeah.
Super, thank you. I'll follow up with you on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Colleagues, any other questions? Director, thank you very much. I am personally and professionally thrilled that you are back with the City of Baltimore. I'm certain that the department is in very capable hands with your touch. Thank you. I want to take a moment to thank Chief Moore Jackson and her entire team, who are just fantastically responsive. Thank you all, and Chief Curtis, good to see you. We are now in recess until 6 p.m. for Monty. Thank you.
Thank you.